Okay, again, I'd like to welcome everyone here. Bienvenue à tous. We have a full lineup this afternoon, colleagues, and I'll just introduce the witnesses that are before us. We have back with us Deputy Commissioner Barbara George. We have Assistant Commissioner Technical Operations with the RCMP, Bruce Rogerson. Again, Chief Superintendent Fraser McCauley, who's been with us many times before. Staff Sergeant Mike Frizzell. Criminal Operations Officer Doug Lang, now stationed in Winnipeg. Denise Ravine, Public Service Employee. As individuals, we have Rosalie Burton, former Director General Human Resources, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, retired Inspector Paul Waugh of the Ottawa Police Service. We have Norman Surwa, the retired member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police CSIS, and retired Sergeant Keith Esterbrooks from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Mr. Williams, a point of order.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we just can't really handle this number of witnesses on a regular basis. In fact, you know, I'm getting so squished up here. If we get squished anymore, I'm going to be sitting on your lap pretty soon, and I'm not going to assure that I would like that very much. And but I think that we have to get a handle as a steering committee on witnesses that we can properly question adequately, and then move on to the next witness. To have a dozen people being questioned by a dozen people in 2 hours makes no sense whatsoever. And I do ask you as a chair to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Well, Mr. Williams, I agree with you 100%. However, I can explain why it does happen. It's because people make motions at the end of meetings, they get consent, and they're approved, and that's why they're here. I would prefer that those matters be left with the steering committee for determination and decision, but the committee has decided otherwise, and that's why they're here. And I agree with what you're saying 100%, and perhaps the next time somebody makes a motion, you or some other member of the committee might want to consider.
So I'll just go on the record. So the next time this committee asks for more witnesses, I will automatically deny consent, and not that I'm trying to obstruct it, but I want the steering committee to handle it.
Well, okay, that's good, Mr. Williams. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, there's a number of witnesses that do hope opening statements. However, I've got a few statements I want to make myself, and that, colleagues, concerns the application in the Federal Court of Canada Trial Division being made by Deputy Commissioner Barb George, and it does involve the privileges of this House, and it's an application that certainly does concern this committee, and it's one we're following very closely. And I would like to make a statement at this time pertaining to the legal privileges applied to the hearings of this particular committee, and all committees of Parliament, I should say. In particular, I want to affirm on behalf of this committee that this committee insists on its parliamentary privileges. In particular, that testimony provided to this committee is not available for use in any other proceedings or actions elsewhere. It is of some considerable concern to the committee that the Royal Canadian Mounted Police has commenced internal disciplinary proceedings and, as well, a criminal investigation for perjury against former RCMP Deputy Commissioner Barbara George, who has been and continues to be a witness before this committee. Our concern here is not limited to this witness, but applies to all witnesses who come before this committee. We understand that these actions by the RCMP against former Deputy Commissioner George are based on testimony she has given to this committee. This, colleagues, is contrary to the law of parliamentary privilege and is not acceptable. It is important that all witnesses before this committee be assured that the testimony they give to this committee cannot be used elsewhere against them. The credibility given to witness testimony and to the proceedings of this committee's proceedings, as a result, will be seriously compromised if witnesses can be intimidated by actions that are taken against them or by worries about actions that could be taken against them. If the committee so instructs, I shall immediately convey these concerns by letter to Interim RCMP Commissioner Busson and ask that she expressly assure this committee by return letter that the testimony of any individual before this committee, whether or not an employee of the RCMP, will not be used in any proceeding or action against the individual. So those are just some comments I'm going to make. Mr. Christopherson.
Move consistent with the statement you just read that the letter you refer to be sent on behalf of this committee.
Okay, let's deal with that immediately. Does he unanimous consent? All in favor? The motion will be out today. Mr. Williams, you had a point?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. In view of this investigation is ongoing as we speak and has not been terminated, or we haven't heard back from Commissioner Busson, I would therefore think that only appropriate that we ask Ms. Barbara George to step down from being a witness at this committee today until we have this matter resolved. I do not think it's appropriate that she be answering questions or be asked questions here today in light of what is going on in other venues until these are stopped. I would therefore move that she be asked to withdraw.
Well, Mr. Williams, if I may speak to that, it's entirely up to the committee to decide that, but I would certainly caution the committee against going down that road, because if that were the case, any witness that made an application would be excused from appearing or testifying before this committee. The rule of subjustice does not apply to parliamentary committee proceedings, and the law of parliamentary privilege is clear, and it's I believe it's well understood, and I don't see any real reason why she should step down from appearing before this committee.
Mr. Chairman.
But again, Mr. Williams, if I may continue, Mr. Williams, it is up to the committee.
Well, that's my point.
So, yeah,
it's up
that's
to the
right.
committee
It's
to
up to the committee to decide, not me.
I made a motion that she should be asked to withdraw.
Okay. Does Mr. Williams have unanimous consent to put the motion?
He wants to speak to. Mr. Christopherson wants to speak to first.
Does it need unanimous consent?
Yes, because it's a motion.
Mr. Chairman, it can't require unanimous consent because it'll be 48 hours before we can discuss it. She's sitting right at the table.
Mr. Christopherson, do you want to speak to this?
I would like to, Chair. I would just, and for the benefit of Mr. Williams and other members of the committee, the subcommittee did meet today at noon, which we've been taken to doing and will continue to do every week while we're continuing these hearings to try to orchestrate all of this. And at that meeting, we had Mr. Walsh, the parliamentary law clerk, and his senior assistant, Mr. Tardy, who gave us a fulsome presentation. We had a chance to ask questions. It's not just coincidental that this letter was just read, that the letter is being forwarded to the RCMP commissioner. We have, for what it's worth, one of us from each party, collectively have satisfied ourselves that we are in a strong enough position, and for the reasons the chair has outlined and others, our recommendation is that we are clear to go and that we should continue with today's hearings, including Ms. George.
However, I am prepared to, it's a committee decision, it's not my decision, so I'm prepared to put it to a vote. All in favor of Mr. Williams' motion that Mrs. Deputy Commissioner George step down and not appear as a witness in today's hearings. All in favor of that motion, please raise your hand. Contrary-minded. Motion defeated. Okay, yes, Mr. Williams.
Yeah, I have another issue, Mr. Chairman, and it's I consider a serious matter. I understand that there is some lawsuits that have been commenced by a witness against one of the members of this committee, and it seems to me that this could be a conflict of interest by a member of this committee asking questions of someone who has launched a lawsuit against them, and therefore I thought our law clerk was going to be here today and we could ask his opinion. Yes. Okay, perhaps we can ask him to come forward and give his opinion on the matter, and we go from there.
The law clerk is here. In fact, we have both of them here, Mr. Williams.
What's the question, Mr. Chairman?
Before I do, I want to introduce the colleagues and the witnesses to Mr. Rob Walsh, who's the clerk of the Legislative Council. Welcome, Mr. Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What's the question?
The question is, Mr. Chairman, that I'm aware, I believe there is a lawsuit by one of the witnesses against one of the members of this committee, and it seems to me there's a conflict of interest by that particular member asking questions of a witness when there is other proceedings at another venue going on between them.
Well, the term conflict of interest, Mr. Chairman, is used in a variety of contexts. One of those contexts is the Code of Conflict of Interest for members of Parliament. That, however, deals with private interests as against the larger public interest. A lawsuit as such isn't a private interest in the sense that the Code contemplates members having private interests. However, is there some other kind of conflict of interest here? Obviously, members who are in lawsuits have a keen interest in that lawsuit and its eventual outcome. But I don't know that it's an interest of a kind that causes the member to be disqualified from participating in the proceedings of this committee, although it may be something that some members might think warrants some constraint or restraint by the member, given that the other side of the lawsuit is participating in the same proceeding. There is a sub judice rule, which is a practice of the House. It's not a rule as such, but it's a practice, well-established practice of the House, that members in debates or proceedings such as this do not comment on matters that are pending before the courts. That's out of respect to the judicial function, so that it is afforded ample opportunity to consider those issues without any seeming interference by the legislative branch. But having said that, this is not to say that a member of Parliament who finds himself met with a lawsuit is thereby disqualified from participating in debates or proceedings pertaining to matters that relate to the subject matter of that lawsuit. Fundamentally, bottom line, sorry it takes so long, but it's a matter of personal judgment and perhaps the personal preference of the committee as to whether this particular lawsuit warrants any intervention by the committee to the member.
Mr. Williams.
I would therefore suggest, based on that the member be given an opportunity to withdraw if he so chooses.
Any member that wants to choose that can do so, Mr. Williams. It doesn't need the chair. However, I would think that if we allowed this as a precedent, it would be easy to get rid of members of Parliament or parliamentary debates, committee debates, and I see it being more of a personal item. If the member thinks it's appropriate that he not participate or not be here, then he or she would have to make that determination. Okay, then we do have an... yes. In accordance with previous practice of this committee, we will ask the clerk at this point in time to swear in the witnesses. And in the meantime, while he's getting down there, Mr. Christopher, you have a point?
Yes, I have a suggestion, maybe a motion, that in light of the number of witnesses we have, in the light of the fact we all have to be here for bells at 6:30, that we extend this meeting 1 hour up until voting time. Now, I want to also say I realize that that's a last-minute thing, and everybody may have, no one should feel that this just shows whether they're committed or not. But if people's schedule allows, given we have to be here to vote, we could use the hour.
It's up to you people. So I'm in the committee's hands, people.
I think we should ask a question.
We need unanimous consent. Yes. So, is anyone contrary-minded? That's the way I'm going to put the question. Is there anyone contrary-minded?
Speak for myself.
There's no one contrary-minded. Okay.
Well, Mr. Chair, just for one moment, though, one of our members has to leave at 5 o'clock. So if there's an assurance that there's no motions going to be placed and no votes required.
We can always replace.
Okay. Well, I can always adjourn them until the member comes back, and then we'll undertake to do that. Yes. We can assure the member that we no votes if he's absent for an hour or half an hour. Okay. If that's so be the case, we will continue the meeting until 6:30 or the bells start ringing.
The evidence I shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
En français. Voting now.
Je, Normand Sirois, jure de dire
Normand Sirois, do swear that the evidence I shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Oui. OK.
Je, Paul Roy, jure de dire
I, Paul Roy, do swear that the evidence I shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
I, Barbara George, do swear that the evidence I shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Thank you. I, Rosalie Burton, do swear that the evidence I shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
I, Doug Lang, do swear that the evidence I shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
I, Bruce Rogerson, swear that the evidence I shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
I, Fraser McCauley, do swear that the evidence I shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
I, Denise Revine, do swear that the evidence I shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
I, Mike Frizzell, do swear that the evidence I shall give on this examination shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you very much. We have 6 of the witnesses that do have open statements, albeit some are short. The first I'm going to call upon is Deputy Commissioner George.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, let me begin by thanking the committee for the opportunity to appear this afternoon to address any concerns members may have about these important issues. Given that this is my 3rd appearance before the committee, and recognizing that there are several witnesses here today, I will keep my comments as short as possible. There are 3 main issues that I would like to address, 2 of which having arisen only after my most recent appearance before the committee. The first issue relates to the letter dated March 17, 2005, written over my signature, addressed to Great West Life and tabled here on April 18, 2007. When the letter is read in its entirety, it is clear that its purpose was to seek the return of monies that were improperly transferred from the pension fund to cover certain insurance administration costs. I would ask the committee to review the letter carefully, as the member for Etobicoke Centre and Sergeant Frizzell have implied that this letter suggests some wrongdoing on my part. This is not true. Given the importance of this letter, I would like to read the first paragraph. Dear Mr. Foley, we are writing to you to advise that the RCMP has recently reviewed the agreement concerning the funding approval from both the RCMP Insurance Committee and the Pension Advisory Committee dated February 17, 2003, concerning the cost sharing of insurance administration costs. This review determined that the agreement was entered into without appropriate authorization and must subsequently be reversed. The chairman of both committees concur that the monies paid to Great West Life Assurance Company to cover the pensioners' portion of insurance administration outsourcing must be returned to the RCMP pension fund." End of quote. The agreement that I referenced in that letter was signed on February 17, 2003 by my predecessor, Jimmy Wanovich, and I will table a copy of it here today. Let me be clear. The letter that I sent to Great West Life was to correct an error that had been made by my predecessor, Jim Iwanovich. As a result of this letter, Great West Life returned the amount requested, $540,327.36 plus interest to the RCMP pension fund. The return of the money was necessary as Jim Iwanovich did not have Treasury Board approval or authority to use pension money to cover the insurance administration costs. Mr. Chairman, the second issue I would like to address is my involvement in preparing the Commissioner's response to this committee relating to the decision to return Sergeant Frizzell to his unit. Following our appearance before this committee on February 21, 2007, I communicated with Assistant Commissioner Dave Gork about Sergeant Frizzell. I have subsequently tabled a copy of the email exchange between Assistant Commissioner Gork and myself on this subject. It is dated February 25, 2007. Contrary to what has been said to this committee, I did not personally draft any letters for Commissioner Busson's signature. Those letters were drafted by RCMP Legal Services. I did, however, speak with RCMP Legal Services and the Commissioner about the possible content of the Commissioner's response. In particular, we discussed the information that I had been provided by Assistant Commissioner Gork. RCMP Legal Services advised against including the same on the basis of possible privacy concerns and because Assistant Commissioner Gork would himself be appearing before the committee on March 28, 2007. In support of this, I am tabling a copy of an email dated February 28, 2007 that I received from RCMP Legal Services on what we should and should not include in the Commissioner's response. Further, I would respectfully direct the committee to the testimony given by Assistant Commissioner Gork on March 28th when he confirmed that he was here to supplement the Commissioner's written response with his personal knowledge of the situation. Indeed, Assistant Commissioner Gork was clear that it was one of the main reasons why he had been asked to be here on that day. The third and final area that I wanted to address was the questions surrounding Sergeant Frizzell's health at the end of June 2005. When I first appeared before this committee on February 21st, I testified as follows, and I quote, "The best I can state is that when Sergeant Frizzell left, I understood that he returned to his home division, which was A division. I'm being careful with regards to privacy concerns here, but I understand it was for health reasons." End of quote. The committee will note that this answer was given before I had been able to confer with Assistant Commissioner Gork and before I had received the email from him that I have tabled. Mr. Chairman, I would like to table 2 additional emails that speak directly to this issue. The first email is part of an exchange that I had with then Superintendent Doug Lang on June 20th, 2005. I had written to Superintendent Lang at 11:16 a.m. that morning to ask what was being done about Sergeant Frizzell. By that point, I had been advised that he was being returned to his original workplace. I received an email response from Superintendent Lang at 12:22 p.m. after he had served Sergeant Frizzell with the written order instructing him to return to his home unit. The email reply reads in part, quote, "We had a lengthy discussion regarding Sergeant Frizzell's obsession with the ongoing payments in the insurance program and the related behaviors he was displaying. It was strongly suggested to him that he seek counseling through the Health Services Officer, whereby the doctor-client privilege would not be affected by his non-disclosure designation on this file." End quote. The second email that I would like to table, Mr. Chairman, shows an exchange between Doug Lang and Paul Roy dated June 28, 2005. I was copied on the exchange at the time. The first note was from Paul Roy to Doug Lang at 9:46 a.m. and reads in part as follows, I quote, Sergeant Frizzell paged Sergeant St. Jacques yesterday, and by the sounds of it, was abusive and threatening of grievances and actions against Sergeant St. Jacques and the Ottawa Police. I am vacating the office in the next 2 days, and I really don't feel like dealing with this individual anymore." End quote. Doug Lang wrote back at 2:29 p.m., and I quote again, "Mike," meaning Sergeant Frizzell, "is off ODS, which means off-duty sick, until July 11th, and then will be AOL, which means away on leave, until August the 8th. I have inquired into his stability, and I don't want to aggravate any recovery." End of quote. It was these comments from Doug Lang about Sergeant Frizzell's health and stability that led me to think that health issues might have factored into the decision to serve him with a written order of June 20th, 2005. Again, at no time did I mislead or intend to mislead this committee. I was attempting to answer the committee's questions about events that had occurred almost 2 years ago to the very best of my recollection. In closing, Mr. Chairman, I would like to take a final moment to once again speak to the very serious allegation that I have perjured myself before this committee. Last week, the member of Etobicoke Centre attempted to introduce a report to this committee on that subject. I was pleased that a number of members indicated that it was premature and unfair to do so before I had been able to give my response to the comments made by the witnesses that day. It is now clear that the member for Etobicoke Centre has formed a biased view of these matters even before having heard all of the relevant evidence. To the extent that he has repeated these unfounded allegations outside Parliament, he has been served with the appropriate notice. Mr. Chairman, the committee's ongoing inquiry into these matters has devoted considerable time and attention to my conduct and actions. To that end, I think there are some key points that the committee must bear in mind. First and foremost, I was not in charge of human resources between 2001 and 2003 when the wrongdoing at issue was taking place. Moreover, I never ordered an unauthorized transfer of monies out of the pension fund or insurance fund. I never circumvented RCMP or public service hiring policies to secure jobs for either friends or families. I never contravened Treasury Board or Public Works rules with respect to government procurements and contracts. I never used taxpayer money or pension fund money to pay for golf. I never interfered with the Ottawa Police Services investigation. And I never ordered anyone to remove Sergeant Frizzell from his assignment with the Ottawa Police investigation. Thank you.
Very much, Deputy Commissioner George.
Mr. Chairman, I got a couple of points, if I may.
You may, yeah.
Yeah, number one, this is a little bit maybe facetious, but perhaps a law clerk could advise the legal services of the RCMP about a little course on parliamentary law so that they understand that privacy and all that stuff, we get what we ask for. Second one is much more important. I mentioned to you and the clerk a week or so ago that if people are going to be tabling emails in this committee, in this venue, that they should be given to the clerk, translated, and therefore can be circulated in both official languages to us when they are tabled. Here we have a whole bunch of emails being tabled again, I presume in one language only, and therefore they cannot be distributed to the committee members, and we're left in the dark again. Now, can the clerk please ensure, when witnesses are being summoned before this committee, that they are informed that if they're going to table any emails, they be given to the clerk ahead of time and translated and available for distribution immediately that they are tabled. Please.
Did you get those? You didn't get those emails, did you? No, I just get them now.
I got them now.
Yeah, but she's not allowed to do so.
Okay, then. Okay, Mr. Williams, your point's well taken. I'm just going to deal with Mr. Williams first, then we'll go to you. Your point's well taken. There are some technical or protocol issues here because some of these witnesses are coming up in short notice. Some of them don't have the wherewithal, especially retired members, to translate them. And of course, we'll translate them. We'll translation, but they're not. The clerk has indicated to me that they're not obligated to. But you're certainly right. It would be better if we did have them before the event. So.
I would have the clerk instruct these witnesses when they're summoned before the committee, and I mentioned at the beginning that's a total disorganization about bringing these witnesses forward, but they should be given ample time to prepare and advise that if they're going to table anything, that it be given to the clerk and translated by this committee so that all committee members can get it in both official languages when it is tabled. That shouldn't be a big thing to ask for.
Okay, somebody else over here at a point. Okay, I'm sorry.
Point of order.
Mr. Wisniewski.
Yes, just for clarification, it was just stated that I had attempted to move a motion in the last meeting on perjury. In fact, it was noticed that at a future date, and of course dependent on testimony that comes before us, that I may be tabling a contempt of Parliament motion, or I'll use the proper...
Mr. Chairman, I object to this, Mr. Chairman.
Or the proper proceeding.
Mr. Chairman, I object to this.
Just for clarification purposes.
Mr. Chairman,
anything further?
No member of Parliament has the right to table a motion of contempt of Parliament, and therefore he was totally out of order to use that terminology again in a public meeting with witnesses before this committee. And as I said, I gave him the opportunity to withdraw, and I would certainly encourage him to do so.
Okay, I'll remind members the way any contempt of Parliament would work. It would not be this committee, actually it would be the House. The committee could make a recommendation to the House to deal with it. That's all this committee could do. And I would ask all members to please be temperate in their remarks dealing with allegations such as this. And it's a parliamentary committee. We follow the rules of fairness, and I believe we have to be a little more temperate in some of our remarks dealing with this type of language. Okay, then, Mr. Assistant Commissioner Rogerson, you have an opening comments?
Yes, I do. I'd like to say before I commence today that I'd like to thank the committee for allowing me to come before you to at least present what I believe happened in around June 15th to June 20th. However, before commencing, I'd also like to emphasize that reporting on one's ethical behavior is never an easy task, and sometimes it comes with severe repercussions. Unfortunately, in most cases, there is never a win-win solution. To help address such situations, in my role as appropriate officer here in Headquarters, Ottawa, I took upon myself in January 2007 to send a memo to all Headquarters employees as it relates to Section 37 in the RCMP Act and matters of code of conduct and reporting on ethical behavior. Within this section it states, it is incumbent on every member, in subsection E, to ensure that any improper or unlawful conduct of any member is not concealed or permitted to continue. My memo also encouraged the notion of being able to come forward with their concerns around such behavior by stating, it is equally as important to ensure that these individuals are treated with respect and continue to perform without fear of reprisal or branded a whistleblower. I have the copy of that memo with me. C'est disponible dans le deux langues officielles.
It's available in both official languages.
Proceeding, I would like it to be known that I'm neither pleased nor am I supportive of certain actions I have witnessed during these proceedings to date. In this regard, the RCMP is an organization which holds very high standards for it and its employees to adhere to. So much so, we have developed a mission, vision, and values commitment statement whereby at the very foundation you will note our core values are integrity, honesty, professionalism, compassion, respect, and accountability. Having stated this, I want to assure the committee that my responses to your questions will be both fulsome and provided to the best of my knowledge. To ensure I do not move off topic and to keep my role in context dealing with the removal of Staff Sergeant Frizzell, I have taken the liberty of listing out in this personal statement what I believe transpired during the period from June 15th to 22nd, 2005. I also have taken the liberty of validating this information with Superintendent Jim Newman and Chief Superintendent Doug Lang. I brought with me all relevant unvetted material. Therefore, to facilitate your review, I trust the following statement will finally identify and help clarify this very troubling and confusing situation. On February 21st, 2007, I was informed of the information provided to the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Public Accounts However, as the response given by Deputy Commissioner Barb George as to how Staff Sergeant Mike Purcell was removed from his office, I felt there was a more accurate answer. In this regard, I recalled a cell phone discussion with Deputy George herself, whereby we discussed Sergeant Frizzell's removal. She wanted Frizzell removed because he had left an unprofessional, harassing phone message on her subordinate's phone message manager. During this conversation, I informed her I was not in a position to remove him as he did not report to me, and that Assistant Commissioner Dave Gork was in position to remove him as he did not report to me. All right. With that, she stated that was all she needed to know. This cell phone conversation happened while I was returning from a National Police Services retreat, and Jim Newman was in the vehicle with me at the time. To confirm this, I checked my cell phone records, which showed her office number 613-993-3445 being contacted by myself at 16:09 hours on June 16, 2005. In addition, since it was my direct report, Superintendent Doug Lang, who was involved in the removal of Frizzell from his office a few days later, and since Frizzell's office was situated nearby, I had first-hand knowledge of when and possibly why it was done, due to a harassment allegation. Although Lang informed me of his actions in that it was taken care of and that Frizzell was leaving, I did not have any knowledge of any formal written order at the time. I thought Frizzell's removal was simply related more to the harassment allegation by Deputy Commissioner George. Given what I knew, I requested a copy of the Standing Committee minutes for the February 21, 2007 meeting. In addition, while at the Senior Management Team meeting on the 22nd of February, I mentioned to Assistant Commissioner Darrell LaFosse that I had concerns with what was stated surrounding Frizzell's removal. He informed me at that time that Deputy Commissioner George had also contacted him, and Chief Superintendent Fraser McCauley was aware of same. Upon reviewing the February 21, 2007 Standing Committee minutes, I sent an email dated February 26 to both Chief Superintendent Lang and Superintendent Newman, highlighting the questioning surrounding Frizzell's removal and the responses as provided by Deputy Commissioner George. I worded this message to ensure that I was not leading them in their own recollection of the facts as I knew them to be, which read as follows. To Jim and Doug. For your info, I have attached the most recent minutes from the Public Accounts Committee on the pension review. You will note that there was considerable question surrounding the removal of Staff Sergeant Mike Frizzell, and more specifically, who ordered him to be escorted out. I have highlighted the section surrounding this area, as you two may be called at a later date. The committee is meeting today to see if it will hear from several other people, including Frizzell, who will most likely answer the questions surrounding his removal. He knows who was involved beyond just the two of you. I trust you kept good notes, as this issue seems to be heating up instead of cooling down. Regards, Bruce. Superintendent Newman responded in his email of February 27th, noting, Bruce, I guess she forgot about her phone call to you while we were returning to Ottawa from our retreat. Doug Lang responded in his email of February 28th, Bonjour, Jim et Bruce. If anyone wants, I have an electronic copy of the written order we served on Frizzell at the request of Assistant Commissioner Gork and Deputy Commissioner George. It says it all. As his email showed Deputy George's clear involvement, I sought further clarification from Lang, as his recollection contradicted her response surrounding the issue she did not know who served the order. I therefore sent another email to Lang requesting further info as to who actually was involved. Thanks, Doug, I said. Your previous email stated the order came from both Assistant Commissioner Gork and Deputy Commissioner George. However, the memorandum of 2005-06-20 does not mention her. I know she called me just prior to this. Could you clarify, please? And his response to your email clearly stated, yes, I can. I spoke with Deputy George on the phone during this period, before the order was prepared, who provided me further details of Sergeant Frizzell's continuance of this investigation after he had been asked to stop, and what she had deemed continued harassment of one of her employees by Sergeant Frizzell. It was the lady that Mike Jeffrey went to work for. I received no formal order from either Assistant Commissioner Gork or Deputy George, just requests from both to ensure the situation was rectified, and Assistant Commissioner Gork's direction that it be served on Frizzell in the form of a written order. I advised both when it had been formally served, Doug. This to me showed she knew exactly who served the order on Frizzell. On February 28th, I called Chief Superintendent Fraser McCauley to reaffirm his version on how Frizzell was removed from his office, along with being present with Assistant Commissioner Darrell LaFosse when he was called about Frizzell. He confirmed this info and stated he was to speak to the Commissioner and would be discussing Frizzell along with his own situation with the Commissioner herself, and anything I had would help. As a result, I sent him the email on March 1st, 2007, which you already have before you, surrounding what I knew to be the circumstances surrounding Frizzell's removal. On March 8th, I sent a draft statement surrounding the information concerning our involvement to both Chief Superintendent Lang and Newman for their review and feedback with respect to what I've just previously stated. I also included the Standing Committee's key questioning points surrounding Frizzell's removal. On March 9th, Newman responded, "Good morning, Bruce. I have reviewed the document you have prepared. I do not have anything to add. I never made notes following your discussion with her while in the vehicle. If memory serves me correctly, I mentioned that I thought it was inappropriate for her to discuss the issue with you as you were the appropriate officer for headquarters, that at some point in time in the future you may be seized with the file. In relation to serving the member, I accompanied Doug as a witness. Then I tried to explain that the criminal investigation was finished and that an internal would probably commence. That's it. That's all. I may have made notes, but they are buried with the rest of my stuff in storage." Doug Lang responded to the same information I reiterated to the committee today. "Bruce, I have no problem with anything you have documented. It is an accurate representation." Doug. On April 15, 2007, I was interviewed by Chief Superintendent Bob Paulson surrounding my knowledge of these events. At this time, he also produced 3 emails, one dated June 15, 2005, from Deputy Commissioner Barb George to me outlining her concern, along with an attached transcript of the phone message left on Rosalie Burton's phone, one dated June 17, 2005, from me to George, whereby I acknowledged their phone call of June 16, and if she wanted me to still look into the matter, and a third email from George to Doug Lang during the same period outlining that she had a conversation with Assistant Commissioner Dave Gork about Frizzell. I commented on the first 2, however, had no knowledge of this third email showing George did in fact have direct contact with Gork himself surrounding Frizzell's removal. My admin assistant also recalls when Deputy George's office called looking for me in June 2005. As she needed to speak to me immediately, my assistant gave her my office page number and my cell phone number, which led to my calling Deputy Commissioner George on June 16th, which is how I called Deputy George on that same date. This would coincide with the emails mentioned above on June 15th and 17th. I've since talked to Doug Lang, and he acknowledged that Barb George had called her the morning of June 17th with respect to Frizzell's behavior. In summation, the aforementioned info is how I understood things to have been done. Deputy George was actively seeking Staff Sergeant Frizzell's removal as he was harassing one of her employees. Based upon what I've become aware of, this was accomplished through her direct liaison with both Assistant Commissioner Dave Gork and Superintendent Lang shortly after contacting me on June 16th. Whether or not it was Inspector Paul Roy, George, or Gork who actually directed Lang to serve the order on Frizzell seems to have confused the issue here. Also, whether one was seeking Frizzell to cease and desist, be stopped, and or removed has complicated the matter as well. The fact remains, the formal removal of Frizzell commenced between June 15th and 20th, 2005, and Chief Superintendent Lang's actions were no doubt influenced by Deputy Commissioner George's direct and clear involvement in Frizzell being served such order. In this regard, as mentioned, he was contacted by her directly, along with others, during this exact same time frame. He consulted with them on the order, he served the order, and when executed, advised them when it was done, which showed Deputy George also knew about the order and who served it. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Assistant Commissioner Rogerson. The next opening statement is from Rosalie Burton.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, honorable members, thank you for the opportunity to appear before committee today. I welcome the opportunity to provide the facts as I know them and the actions I took. My actions were both transparent and proactive throughout my tenure at the RCMP, and they were guided and supported by the values and ethics code of the public service. As a result of the reorganization of the Human Resources team, I became the Director General of Human Resources Systems and Strategies effective April 1st, 2004. Among my many responsibilities was the National Compensation Policy Center. I was in that role for 18 months. With regard to the timeline concerning my role, the facts are as follows. Prior to my arrival, 3 events had already taken place, namely that 1. The RCMP internal audit of the pension plan had been concluded. 2. The director of the National Compensation Policy Center, Dom Krupe, had been sent home by the Chief Human Resources Officer. 3. A criminal investigation that I later learned was called Project Probity had been launched. Upon arrival in my position, I learned that the Pension and Insurance Administration had been outsourced based on incomplete and poorly written business cases. What I found was the governance model was not clear, that these committees often directed work, requested research, and made other decisions without necessarily reflecting the National Compensation Policy Center overall work plan. I had concerns about the insurance program, so I called for an internal audit. I disclosed to Barb George and Paul Gauvin my concerns with respect to the insurance program. They, along with the senior management team, supported my request. Mike Gaudette, Executive Assistant to the Chief Human Resources Officer Barb George, suggested that I contact Staff Sergeant Mike Frizzell and share my concerns with him in support of the work of the criminal investigation team. I did so. I made this call to Mike Frizzell on December 15th, 2004, and he came to my office on December 20th, 2004. I advised him that I had concerns and some information with regard to the pension and insurance program. Mr. Frizzell then asked if he could tape record what became a 3-hour conversation. At the end of it, he told me how he had presented the then past Commissioner Murray and the senior executive team with the RCMP core values statement, and that I epitomized those values. I gave him the letter of agreement, dated February 17, 2003, that was signed by Jim Iwanovich as chair of the Pension Advisory Committee and Deputy Commissioner Pierre Lange, chair of the Insurance Committee, that authorized what I believed was inappropriate funding of insurance activities. I also gave him a sketch of how I believed the funding flowed between Great-West Life, Morneau-Sebeco, and the RCMP. On January 5, 2005, I sent Mike Frizzell an insurance backgrounder paper that I had asked a policy analyst to prepare to help with understanding how insurance administration had evolved to this state. My next encounter with Mike Frizzell was on March 9, 2005, for a life insurance pension administration charges, end quote, meeting, chaired by Deputy Commissioner Paul Gauvin. Several decisions were taken. 1. Convene the Insurance Committee to request reversal of prior agreement related to the insurance administration paid by the pension plan. I did this on March 15, 2005. And 2, I was directed to, quote, present a letter to the Insurance Committee and the Pension Advisory Committee chairs requesting reimbursement of the amounts paid to date from the pension plan to Great-West Life. The matter was to be resolved prior to the end of fiscal year end, end quote. I did not do this because it was not unanimous consent to reverse the monies by the Insurance Committee at the March 15th meeting. Instead, I did speak to Barb George, outlining that authority to conduct this cleanup needed to be clearly directed by the Commissioner. To my knowledge, the only letter that was drafted was by Denise Nasrallah, Director of Finance, asking Great-West Life to reimburse the monies to the RCMP Pension Fund. The letter says, Chairman of both committees concur with the monies paid to Great-West Life Assurance Company to pensioners' portion of insurance administration outsourcing must be returned to the pension fund. End quote. Great-West Life replied on March 23, 2005, confirming the refund. I was also directed to, quote, discussion of insurance administration costs to be paid out of appropriation to begin as soon as possible with Treasury Board Secretariat. Once resolved, if appropriation is to begin paying for the administration, discussion and decision to be made as to our ability to apply the resolution retroactively." End quote. As a matter of information, I initiated those discussions with Treasury Board as early as June 2005. Mike Frizzell attended this meeting, this March 9, 2005 meeting. As the minutes indicate, quote, "Inquiry was made as to our ability to speak to key individuals in order to obtain clarification concerning the insurance outsourcing. Confirmation was obtained from Mike Frizzell that his interview with Mr. Krupe is planned for Monday, March 14th, and any discussions should take place after that date." Mike Frizzell stated that he would likely be in a position to respond to Mr. Gauvin's questions following the interview. End quote. I advised Deputy Commissioner Lange, Chair of the Insurance Committee, that an emergent Insurance Committee meeting was necessary to share the scope of the RCMP internal audit and what we had learned to date. The Deputy chaired that meeting. I spoke to the scope of the audit and that the draft audit findings were expected in April 2005. I also explained that there had been a decision taken in February 2003 between the Chair of the Pension Advisory Committee and the Chair of the Insurance Committee that allowed monies to be taken from the pension plan for insurance outsourcing, and this decision should be reversed. There was no motion made at this meeting, and I reported back to Barb George that the Commissioner would have to be the one to direct who had the authority to undertake this activity. On March 21, 2005, I sent Mike Frizzell the internal audit draft report of insurance plans. It supported the concerns I shared with Mr. Frizzell on December 20th and with my superior when I requested the audit. I know Mr. Frizzell received it because he called me to confirm that it had come from me. The last time I heard from Mike Frizzell was the voicemail he left me the first week of June 2005, alleging that deceit and corruption was ongoing in the insurance program and that senior management knew about this. This was a serious allegation, and I immediately called the senior authority on the investigation, Inspector Paul Roy, and asked his advice. He advised that they were in the report-writing phase of the investigation, that Chief Bevan would be briefed in a week, that the RCMP Commissioner would be briefed June 24, 2005, and the RCMP Senior Executive Committee briefing was scheduled for June 27, 2005. He advised me that Mike Frizzell was probably not speaking on behalf of the investigation, and this could be the result of some personal fallout, and he recommended that I not accept Frizzell's suggestion to meet. I followed his advice. I subsequently reported the voicemail and my actions to my superior, Barb George, who assured me that I'd done the right thing. My responsibility in insurance was to prepare the management action plan that consisted of corrective administrative actions to the RCMP internal audit. To do this, I initiated an actuarial review conducted by the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions to ensure the longevity of the insurance plans. I requested a legal opinion to determine authorities to administer the insurance program. I contracted a study on group life insurance administration framework by Mercer Consulting. I obtained the first ever audit of the group life financial statements, and I initiated discussions with Treasury Board of Secretariat officials regarding governance and authority on the insurance plan on June 20, 2005. To undertake this work in accordance with government policies and procedures, there was a working period that included following actions on my part. Between June 2005 and October 06, the National Compensation Policy Center prepared statements of work, requests for proposal, review and evaluate bids from contractors, and provided regular briefings to RCMP Audit and Evaluation Committee, the RCMP HR Council, Human Resources Council, and the RCMP Insurance Committee on progress to date. On October 30, 2006, I updated the RCMP Insurance Committee on the Management Action Plan, and it was up to the committee to take action on the studies and information provided. My comment to the Insurance Committee was, that what I had seen from the draft of the Office of the Auditor General report was that there be no surprises and that the corrective actions were recognized by the Auditor General. The file was reassigned by Assistant Commissioner Kevin Mole from me to an Inspector Tony Pickett after that meeting. He told me it was not a question of competence, but that I was a risk because, to use his words, the RCMP does not own you. That was the end of my involvement. I welcome all questions and queries from this committee, and I want to assure members of this committee my full cooperation in this and related investigative processes.
Retired Inspector Watt, do you have an opening statement? Okay.
Sir.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. On February 21st, 2007, Chief Vince Bevan appeared before this committee and committed the Ottawa Police Service to full and complete cooperation with this committee. The Ottawa Police Service remains committed to assisting this committee in their deliberations. I share that commitment. I wish, therefore, to make a very brief opening statement to assist the committee with issues that remain outstanding from my last testimony. May I also point out that at my last appearance, I was asked to prepare a written response to questions surrounding my involvement with Staff Sergeant Frizzell, who was at the time of the investigation a sergeant. I am submitting a detailed brief to you in that regard. I wish to make only 2 points in my opening remarks. The first about the independence of the Ottawa Police investigation, and secondly about Sergeant Frizzell. With respect to the independence of my investigation, I will not repeat all the comments I made in my opening statements delivered before you on April 18th, but I stand by what I said then. I would like to emphasize that I was in charge of this investigation and reported to Chief Bevan, not to anyone in the RCMP. I only contacted Assistant Commissioner Gork when I had administrative matters to deal with. Nobody from the RCMP at any rank, or indeed from anywhere else, attempted to influence me in any way. Normally in policing, an officer reports to a superior. That superior is responsible for the officer both administratively and operationally. For example, Sergeant William Sullivan of the Ottawa Police Service worked on this investigation, and he reported to me administratively and operationally. In situations where officers are on secondment, they report to one supervisor for operational matters and report to another supervisor with their parent organization for administrative matters. This was the relationship I had with Sergeant Frizzell. He was responsible to me operationally for work related to the investigation and responsible to his superiors at the RCMP for administrative matters such as leave, discipline, and other employment-related matters. This is not an unusual situation in policing. I went to Assistant Commissioner Gork for all administrative issues regarding the RCMP officers assigned to this investigation. For operational decisions, I gave the orders directly to the RCMP officers assigned to my investigative team. As to my interaction with Sergeant Frizzell, during the investigation there were a number of situations that arose. While he and I agreed on many issues, we also disagreed on many other issues. I consulted with Chief Bevan on this, and he encouraged me to raise these issues with Assistant Commissioner Gork, which I did. I provided details in my written submission. Sergeant Frizzell was not, quote, prematurely removed, unquote, from the investigation. With the delivery of my report to Chief Bevan on June 17th, Project Probity was finished. The order dealing with Sergeant Frizzell, signed by Chief Superintendent Lang, was dated the 20th of June, after the delivery of the final report to Chief Bevan on the 17th of June. By the 20th of June, 2005, the date of the order, the investigation was over, and most of the rest of the team had returned to their regular duties. Only 7 persons out of 23 involved in the investigation were left, and they were just wrapping up. I welcome any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Waugh. We're now going to hear from Mr. Normand Sirois, retired RCMP CSIS. Sir Waugh.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, My involvement with the RCMP pension plan is in relation to requests made under the Access to Information legislation. Following the conclusion of the audit report itself in October 2003, understandably, some people were interested in reading that material. So to that effect, we received several requests regarding the RCMP pension fund documents. I personally was assigned to review 2 specific requests regarding the audit report itself. The Ottawa Police report, summary report, was the object of another request. And I look forward to answering your question regarding this matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Silwa. And lastly, we're going to hear from retired Sergeant Keith Estabrooks.
Mr. Chairperson, committee members, I'm a retired sergeant with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, having served in the force for 35 years and 5 months. For my last 12 years, I was posted to RCMP Access to Information and Privacy, which is ATIP branch, located at RCMP headquarters in Ottawa. And for my first 6 years in ATIP, I was an analyst reviewer. For the last 6, I was a senior NCO in charge of the disclosures unit. ATIP branch has received several requests for specific portions of the RCMP pension fund documents. A request for the audit portion was the first. Superintendent Christian Picard was the OIC, and the reviewer was my colleague, Public Servant Norman Sirois. My involvement with the RCMP pension fund files was a little later and concerned a request for the Ottawa Police Summary Report document of approximately 50 pages, written by OPS Inspector Roy. The OIC at that time was Superintendent Pierre Lavoie. I'm currently employed by the RCMP on a casual short-term contract in ATIP branch because of my expertise in the access and privacy field. 6 senior people have left the branch recently, so there has been an extensive loss of corporate knowledge. I look forward to answering your questions based upon my knowledge of the ATIP work done on the RCMP pension files that I worked on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Estabrooks. So we're now going to go to the questions by members. Well, the first round will be 8 minutes, and first member is Mr. Wisniewski, 8 minutes. Point of order, Mr. Williams.
Yeah, can we be assured, Mr. Chairman, and ask you to exercise your authority as a chair to ensure that the member does not use inflammatory terminology such as perjury and contempt of Parliament and all these things that are totally irrelevant at this point in time?
Well, Mr. Williams, we'll see how the hearing goes. Mr. Wisniewski.
Thank you, Chair. On February 21st, in a question to Deputy Commissioner Barbara George, it was a simple question, whether or not she was involved with Mr. Frizzell's removal. The answer was clear. I can state with absolute finality, that it was neither Commissioner Zaccardelli nor me who had anything whatsoever to do with, as you say, the removal of Sergeant Frizzell. Since then, last week, we've heard a lot of testimony since then, but last week we heard from Assistant Commissioner Lafosse, who was contacted and who stated before this committee that Deputy Commissioner George requested of him to have Mr. Frizzell removed. He directed the Deputy Commissioner to Assistant Commissioner Bruce Rogerson today in the opening statement. We've heard his recollections that, in fact, Deputy Commissioner Barb George contacted him. She initiated the contact. She clearly wanted Mr. Frizzell removed. But there's something else that's puzzling, because in subsequent testimony, Ms. George also stated and raised the issue, and the issue was raised of Mr. Frizzell's harassing techniques of investigation. I guess they date back to January of that year with 2 witnesses, and that was subsequently also referenced as one of the reasons to have him removed. Assistant Commissioner Rogerson, you in fact said that during your phone conversation with the Deputy Commissioner, she asked for Mr. Frizzell to be removed, but she referenced a phone call message that he had left, a message we heard here that was played into the record, about his concerns that insurance funds were improperly being used. Was it clear to you that, in fact, when she asked for Mr. Frizzell's removal, it was that particular phone call that spurred her to place that series of communications?
Yes, it was not only the phone call. It was on June 15th. I was not in the office. She had sent me an email with the attached phone message that was left on Mrs. Burton's phone, and she wanted to contact me. I was not in the office on the 15th. Her office actively contacted my admin assistant, who provided my pager and my cell phone. As a result of receiving a page message on the afternoon of the 16th, I called her directly, and it was surrounding the professionalism and the harassment of one of her people, and it related to the phone message that she had sent me on the 15th. That is when I directed her towards Dave Gork, where I was neither empowered to remove Mike Frizzell at the time.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner. Chief Superintendent Doug Lang, did Deputy Commissioner Bart George take part in building the removal order of Mr. Frizzell with you?
Excuse me, absolutely not.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any discussions or communications with the Deputy Commissioner about his removal?
Yes, on or about June the 17th, I received a phone call from Assistant Commissioner George at the time, advising me of the same circumstance of the complaint regarding Rosalie Burton's voicemail. Our discussion at that time was she was not directing me to do anything. We had a discussion about the circumstances. She wanted something done. She wanted this matter looked into, but at that time she was not in the course of our conversation telling me to do anything. She was making a complaint to me about Mr. Frizzell's behavior and asking that I look into the matter. I took steps after that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lang. Assistant Commissioner Rogerson, during other discussions here in committee, we've heard the term punitive transfers within the RCMP used. Do you believe that there are punitive transfers within the RCMP?
Absolutely.
Mr. Rogerson, I understand you were a whistleblower during the 2001 OPP investigation, and you were the subject of such a transfer. Could you just outline the circumstances?
Well, quite frankly, in the spring of 2001, I questioned our behavior with respect to the acceptance of gifts such as hockey and rounds of golf. That came about after a meeting with the Canadian Association Chiefs of Police, where we talked about the ethical behavior of police forces and the fact that we should not be participating in same. I took that information and I shared it amongst with my own senior management team upon returning. I said, until we get this matter resolved, we've got to get a little more clear direction as to policy surrounding that issue. I then shared that information and talked to our ethics advisor in June, who advised me that I was correct. He provided me some information, and he told me there is no gray area, that such behavior should not be accepted. So I shared that information with a number of senior managers within Ottawa. The first email I got was back from my boss's office telling me to clean out my office. The second email I got was from another senior executive officer commending me for trying to bring this matter to resolution. Having done that, several individuals came to me and talked about their concerns around sole sourcing of contracts and also the continuance of the behavior. I reiterated my concerns around that behavior. I went to the Treasury Board and Public Works Ethics and Ethics Policy with respect to acceptance of gifts such as golf and other aspects. Again, I reaffirmed to myself that this was inappropriate behavior, not necessarily that anybody was being coerced, but the fact of the matter was it was the perception of us participating in such events. I brought the matter to my boss of the day. He told me that in his previous life under Andy Scott, as an advisor to Andy Scott in Saul Jen's office, that he had it under direct authority from the Solicitor General or from the Treasury Board Ethics Advisor that such participation was permissible, and it's no wonder the RCMP is stuck in the dark ages. However, I took it upon myself to again issue another email to all senior managers, including my employees, not to participate in same. Having said that, the following week I was brought to my attention that people were going to continue such behavior. That following Monday, as we had usual Monday morning meetings, I informed the management team that I was no longer accepting anybody's behavior. If they continued, I would initiate a code of conduct investigation myself. I was overruled by my then supervisor, who said he saw nothing wrong with such behavior. Having said that, with all due respect, I did go see Chief Superintendent Barb George, who's a very compassionate person, and I explained my situation, and she understood. I said, look, I've come forward. I'm going to be in trouble. I was then, I guess then you saw the letter that Ron Lewis refers to, where I was chastised for attempting to correct such behavior without going through my immediate supervisor. I then left on language training in September 2001. Ron Lewis and the group took this information before the National Executive Committee, which was co-chaired by Jim Ivanovich and then Commissioner Zaccardelli. Amongst the two of them, they said it was a round of golf and a hockey game, get over it. I thought at that time I had corrected the behavior in the force, and in terms of whistleblowing, I would say that a whistleblower is someone who blows the whistle for the troops to go out of the trenches into the line of fire. In my terms, I blew the whistle, I jumped out of the trenches to keep my people, their careers intact, so they would no longer continue in such behavior. However, I would say that by October, I was brought in by the OPP. They wanted to discuss this and other sole sourcing contracts. I was fully transparent with them. I discussed everything that was brought forward to me. They commended me for my ethical behavior and the fact that my integrity was not for sale. However, shortly thereafter, I was told that I was being held personally accountable for the OPP investigation and the follow-up. By December, I was eliminated from the senior management team of the RCMP. I was also told I could no longer go back to my position as the senior full-time financial officer. You have to excuse me here. In the following year, I was accused of fraudulent leave, unauthorized travel, incompetent for my job. They received no performance pay, and I was effectively fired. By May of 2002, I was offered a position to lead a project in the force, which was a staff sergeant's duty code, where I stayed until February 2005. So, is there punitive? Yes. I warned Fraser when Mike Frizzell came to see me at the beginning of the pension investigation. I warned him that if they could do this to an assistant commissioner with 29 years of an unblemished record, they could do it to anybody. But I'm still here. I'm in front of you. My integrity is not for sale. I represent 99.99% of the officers in this organization, including those in headquarters. Our civilian members are excellent people. We have the best and brightest in technical operations. Just because, we have a handful of people that need to be dealt with. There's no doubt about that. But to respond to your question, that is how I was treated for the last 4 years.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner Rogerson. Thank you, Assistant Commissioner. Mr. Sweet, you have a point of order?
Just immediate supervisor and boss was mentioned on a couple of occasions, and just for the record, if we could have Mr. Rogerson just name who those people are, please.
Okay, perhaps Mr. Rogerson, did you catch the clarification that the member's looking for?
The only people I dealt with during that stream were Deputy Commissioner Gauvin and Barb George, who in the previous year during my performance agreement, where I was provided with a performance agreement for the first time in my career, said I was incompetent, I didn't understand the complexities of the organization, and that perhaps I should go elsewhere. And that was, and I also dealt with Deputy Commissioner Lepke, who was trying to accommodate me into another position.
Mr. Williams, and then we're going to hear from Mr.
Just for the record, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Rogerson said he talked about his boss, as Mr. Sweet had mentioned, and I want you to name, when you said the boss, who exactly was that person, and also you talked about your then supervisor. Was that the same person or somebody else, and if so, name that person?
My immediate supervisor at all times was Mr. Paul Gauvin, the Chief Financial Officer.
And when you refer to the boss, your boss, that's also Mr. Gauvin?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Mr. Williams, Deputy Commissioner George, I understand you have I'll let you allow a comment from you. Go ahead.
I recall quite vividly that afternoon that Assistant Commissioner Bruce Rogerson came into my office. I was the Chief Superintendent at the time and in charge of officer staffing. He came in, and I could see that he was quite agitated. He's a very tall man, so it was difficult for me to speak to him, to look straight up, and I wanted him to sit, but he wouldn't. He had in his hands a great deal of papers, and what he wanted to show me was that this was correspondence he had had going back and forth over several weeks or months, in which he had voiced his concerns regarding certain actions or activities that had taken place within the corporate sector. And I remember him telling me that, you know, Barbara, I'll tell you right up front that I actually took one of these hockey tickets myself, so I'm implicating myself here, but this has to go forward because it's not stopping. I listened to Assistant Commissioner Rogerson, and I said, well, Bruce, you have to go down to the Commissioner on this and give the Commissioner all of this information to get something looked at. For his own reasons, he did not want to do that. And I said to him, well, Bruce, I'm seized with this now, so I will go down to the Commissioner with these papers. And he was agreeable to that. He gave me all the papers, all of the correspondence, and he left. And as I said, he was visibly upset. I took those papers down to Commissioner Zaccardelli of the day. I presented him with the papers. I gave him a brief overview as to what the papers contained and what Assistant Commissioner Rogerson had communicated to me. And at the end of that was it. I handed it over. Shortly thereafter, the investigation by the OPP commenced, and I believe that investigation was called Wapiti. And I just wanted to add that was the commencement of the Wapiti investigation that was undertaken by the OPP.
I'm sorry I keep having to interrupt like this, but we're into the proverbial he said, she said bit right here. This is a committee doing an investigation. We're here to put testimony on the record. We're not here to have a quasi-informal trial of one person saying something, allegations being rebutted by somebody else. And we have to fix this, Mr. Chairman.
Well, Mr. Williams, well, the problem with this line of question is this investigation has to deal with the report of the Auditor General, and we are getting into issues that are, I would classify, not even remotely concerned with the report of the Auditor General. We've got some serious issues, how they were dealt with. It goes to the internal, or the lack of some oversight, the internal organizational behavior, our allegations of the lack of internal organization behavior. But really, you know, if we start going down these roads at every meeting, we're going to be here for a very, very long time. However, I didn't interrupt the questioning. And I certainly, it certainly was, I'm sure, difficult for Mr. Rogers to put this in the record. It is a serious issue. But again, I urge members, all I can do is urge you to stay focused on what the issues that we're dealing with. I'm going to also urge members to keep your questions short. We do not need 2, 3, or 4-minute preambles. And I'm urging all the witnesses to keep your answers brief, to the point, so that we can stick to the issues. So Mr. Brzezinski's out of time. Mr. Laforêt, wait a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to all of our witnesses. I have a question for Ms. George. You are Deputy Commissioner for Human Resources at the RCMP. May I presume that the issue of official languages falls within the purview of your department? Have you already heard that eventually there might be a system of consultants which came in to support officers who had to pass their language tests? Are you aware, or did anyone talk to you about a system where a consultant would come in and help officers who had to pass their language tests in order to help them avoid passing the written French test?
I just went on, but we're trying to deal with the auditor's report about the Pension Insurance Administration, and your concerns may be very serious about official languages and certain people passing their language tests and certain people not pass them. But I'm as chair, I fail totally to see the relevance of where this is going unless you can explain it.
Monsieur le Président, j'aimerais...
Mr. Chairman, I would like to reply that I know that the RCMP has an official languages policy. Officers must be bilingual. And from the very start, we've spoken with RCMP witnesses, and with all due respect, witnesses want to speak their mother tongue, and we haven't heard some of these witnesses speak French, even though they should have. I'm just raising this matter because I have received an email which was also sent to Ms. George. And this is what I wanted to ask her a question about. It was specifically about that situation, and I want to know how she reacted.
And then, but if you have a concern, I urge you to seek an audience with the Official Languages Committee, and we're going to move on. This just a very brief question on that point.
So, Ms. George, I'm asking you whether you've already heard about this situation, because, in fact, it's been said that it was your supervisor, Ms. Rondell, who allowed these people to come in and to help officers pass their French tests. What did you do in that situation?
You're explaining that we've had people come in as lunchbox teachers to come in, or we've had classes set up in-house. There are many different ways that the RCMP allows its members to take French language training.
Do you know Mr. Gord Hodley, who was responsible?
Next issue, and we can deal with this off topic and later on.
Mais je comprends pas qu'elle puisse pas répondre, Monsieur le Président.
I don't understand why the witness cannot answer. I think it's a relevant question. I don't agree with your cutting me off. I'm asking Ms. George to answer a question about an email she has received.
What is relevant to the issue?
Since the very beginning, we have talked about this situation, which involves the RCMP, of course. We've heard various statements. People have said that they were removed from their positions, they were blocked from advancing, and language requirements are important to receiving promotions. It's the same in every other department. What I'm asking Ms. George is whether, indeed, people were favored into certain positions over language skills. We're not only talking about official languages, but the RCMP itself.
Brief comment, Mrs. George.
For certain positions in the RCMP, we have language profiles, and whatever the language profiles are, prospective candidates must meet. The RCMP will accommodate as far as possible to allow
Madame George, vous avez reçu un courriel.
Ms. George, you receive an email from Mr. Gordon Attlee informing you, and I quote, of abuse, if not cheating, as far as learning official languages is concerned and cheating on language tests. Mr. Hadley goes on to say that you yourself, Ms. George, had a tutor, Ms. Rundle herself, who, based on this email, would have passed certain officers, helped them pass their tests. What do you say in response to that?
Speaking of Madame Rundle, has had tens, if not hundreds, of RCMP members and public servants throughout the government. We have to go down and pass public service oral and written exams, as was anybody else. She's an extraordinary teacher, and for anybody to come in and say that there was cheating there, I absolutely reject that. In fact, many deputy commissioners have used her and are still using her services, and she has many teachers in her school.
Est-ce que vous avez répondu à Monsieur?
What did you answer to Mr. Gord Hadley when he shared his concerns with you, when he shared his allegations of cheating? What did you do as the person responsible for human resources? Because this is a big issue. Didn't you do anything? You told me that you don't agree with these allegations. I'm asking you, what did you do when you received this email in September of 2004?
I would have sent that over to the official languages branch and possibly to the central region to have a look at this and to look at those allegations. They should have been looked into.
Est-ce que vous avez eu des réponses des langues?
Did you receive an answer from official languages?
I possibly could get a response to that.
J'aimerais ça que vous puissiez nous fournir.
I would like you to provide us with answers on this matter. I have another question for Ms. Burton. Ms. Burton, on April 18th, Ms. George stated that in June 2005, Ms. Burton told me that some members of her personnel were subject to vigorous interviewing from Staff Sergeant Mike Frizzell. In fact, 2 members of the personnel were indignated after their interview with Mr. Frizzell. Can you tell us who these 2 members of the personnel were who were sent home after having been interviewed by Staff Sergeant Frizzell?
Mr. Chair, there's 2 people that come to mind right away. The first one was Liette Belmar. She was the acting director of the National Compensation Policy Center. The second, as she went home, she's the one that went home distraught, in tears, employees running out of the building after her. And I had been at a meeting in another building, and they came running up to me when I pulled into the parking lot. And I agreed I'd call her at home, and I did call her that evening to make sure that, she was okay. They were concerned she shouldn't have been in any condition to drive. The second name was Jeff Hutchison. And Liette that was around April, maybe mid-April. Jeff Hutchison before that had turned to me and said, that is not an interview, Rosalie, it's an interrogation. So he would have been the second one. But I want to be very clear, I did not know at any point which of my employees were being interviewed and by which investigators. So I didn't have a schedule. I don't know who it was that did the interviewing.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Laforêt. Thank you, Mrs. Burton. Mr. Poilevre, 8 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Rogerson, you indicated that Mr. Gauvin was your boss, and that prior to his position with the RCMP, his role was in the political office of then Solicitor General Andy Scott. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if it was just prior, but it was recently.
Okay. And you spoke about his response to you on your complaints about members of his office accepting gifts, etc. And you said something to the effect that this participation was permissible, and he learned that in Mr. Scott's office. Is that correct?
Yes, he informed me that he had, whilst he worked as an advisor to Mr. Scott, that he had called the Treasury Board Ethics Advisor himself and that there was nothing wrong with what we were doing with respect to the perception of it. And I should go further. He also pointed out that since the company that was offering these gifts in kind, the contract was actually signed by Treasury Board itself to provide those services, and therefore there was no conflict of interest as well.
The contract was signed by Treasury Board?
Well, to my knowledge, for our new financial systems, yes.
With which firm?
At that time, it would have been SAP.
SAP? And that's an acronym for?
That's how they call themselves, SAP. They're a German firm, and they provide the financial systems for a number of agencies.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Mr. Roy, I have an exchange between Mr. Fitzpatrick and yourself from April the 18th. It goes as follows before this committee. Did Ms. Burton ever contact you during the investigation and suggest that Sergeant Frizzell was being a bit too aggressive and abusive in his investigation? You responded, Mr. Roy, yes, she did. Ms. Burton, why did you think it appropriate to comment on Mr. Frizzell's behavior in the investigation to the head of that investigation? Why did you think it was your role to do that?
Well, as I outlined in my opening statement, my contacts with Mr. Frizzell, when I received the voicemail and I asked advice on what should I do with this, Inspector Roy offered that I read it. He probably wasn't speaking on behalf of the investigation. This was probably some personal fallout. Suggested I do not take the meeting that was requested. He went on to say that he's been having problems with that guy, and I said the stress of this investigation is tearing apart the policy center. I can't keep the employees together any longer. There are people running off-site.
Did you not think it inappropriate for someone in your position to intervene with the head investigator of a police investigation into the practices of an organization over which you now had, at that point, control?
Actually, Mr. Chair, I thought it most appropriate that I called the lead authority because the voicemail indicated that there was serious corruption ongoing in senior management in the RCMP.
No, but wait a second.
I cannot go up. Where do I go?
Excuse me, you're changing the subject because I'm not.
Sorry?
Your intervention to Mr. Roy was not about corruption. Your intervention to Mr. Roy, according to his testimony here, was about, quote, abusive and aggressive behavior.
Mr. Chair,
so
I seek to clarify that.
That's what Mr. Roy testified before this committee. So I don't want to hear any new tangents. You contacted Mr. Roy about the alleged behavior of Mr. Frizzell, and I want to know why someone in your position, whose department was being investigated, would think that it would be appropriate for you to contact the head investigator about one of the people on that investigative team, who suspiciously was removed soon after.
Yes, so I would like to go back to, I contacted Inspector Roy because of the voicemail, and I relayed the voicemail to Inspector Roy, and I asked his advice. So first it was about the voicemail alleging that there was ongoing corruption in the RCMP. Not to compromise an investigation. Where do I take a voicemail like that or an allegation?
Mr. Roy did not say that you contacted him about corruption. He said that
Chair, that clarification would have to be sought from Inspector Roy.
Continue on the answer if you want.
Thank you. So I received the voicemail. There are serious allegations about continued corruption of senior management in the RCMP. In my place in the hierarchy, senior management means the commissioner and the senior executive committee. Like, there's only one layer left. Where do I take that? Mr. Chair, I need to complete this.
I have a point of order. So you can put my clock on hold. This is a separate intervention. I'm not asking about whether she relayed information about potential corruption over to the investigator. That's not my question. I know the clock is running, and I know that that might be someone's objective, but my objective here is to ask why she would talk about the comportment of a particular investigator to the investigative team, why someone in her role would find that that kind of an intervention appropriate. She is not answering this question. She is running the clock down. Now, I ask that she either answer it quickly because she's had plenty of time to do so, or that I be allowed to move on to my next question. which I'll allow her, to take her pick.
Ms. Burton, do you understand the question?
Mr. Chair, yes, I'll respond directly to that question.
Okay, go ahead.
The comportment was brought up by Inspector Roy, not myself. The conversation evolved to that. It was Inspector Roy who suggested he was having problems with him, and he wasn't speaking on behalf of the investigation. So I did not initiate the part of that conversation about the comportment of Inspector Roy. Or, excuse me, Inspector...
Thank you very much.
Mike Frizzell.
Thank you very much. For the record, it does say here that in Mr. Fitzpatrick's question, did Ms. Burton ever contact you during the investigation and suggest that, yes, that Sergeant Frizzell was being a bit too aggressive and abusive? So his intervention does indicate that you made the suggestion about Mr. Frizzell. This is important because it would indicate that you were making interventions that may have led to the eventual removal of Mr. Frizzell from this investigation.
Mr. Chair, I have never suggested or requested that Mike Frizzell be removed from an investigation.
Okay, that wasn't my question.
Nor do I presume to have the authority.
Mr. Roy, why was it that Mr. Frizzell was removed? Because we've heard a lot of different stories. What is the final version?
Mr. Frizzell worked on the investigation right up until the end, which was June 17th.
Ms. George, you indicated that he was removed for health reasons, and then you told us that he was removed for his behavior. Which is it?
I didn't tell you he was removed for health reasons. I told you.
Why was he removed?
This is very important here. Your words can bury somebody. So let's be very careful here, sir.
Why was he removed?
They asked me why I thought he was removed.
Why do you think he's removed?
To do for health reasons. I read you the emails in my opening statement. Okay? I read you the emails.
Why was he removed? Tell me now. Why was he removed, according to your knowledge as of today?
Okay, I have two answers for you. One came from the document
We'll add both of them to the list.
Yes, you may. One came from the document that Assistant Commissioner Gork had signed by Chief Superintendent Doug Lang, and it cited various reasons. Okay, that was attached in the letter. I'm listening now to the head of the investigation, Inspector Paul Roy, who tells us that he was not removed. In fact, he was sent back to his home base along with the other 16 or 17 investigators upon completion of his report.
So you're saying he wasn't removed now, period?
This is what Inspector Roy is saying. He was not removed from the investigation.
Okay, because we've heard, first of all, we have heard that he was removed for health reasons. We've heard he was removed for harassing behavior, and now we're hearing that he was not removed.
Well, he wasn't removed.
I'm sorry, but this is becoming very hard to follow.
Well, you know what? It is, particularly since people cannot get an answer out straight. Mr. Chair, may I please speak?
Pierre, you're out of time anyway, so I'll just allow you to finish the answer, and then we'll move on.
Thank you. In February 21st, when I was asked why I thought this was 2 years ago, I didn't have the document in front of me. I remember Doug Lang telling me that it was ODS, he was mentioning the doctor. I thought he had, under stress, he had gone home. Then the document comes in from Assistant Commissioner Gork, and you can see that he stated various other reasons why Assistant Commissioner Gork thinks that he has been removed for various reasons. It's stated right there in that document. I listened to retired Inspector Paul Roy, who says he was not removed. He was simply sent home at the end of the termination of the investigation. So I'm not involved in either aspect of it, and you can take your pick as to which one it was. I would tend to go with retired Commissioner Inspector Paul Roy.
Thank you very much. I have one question following up from that examination by Mr. Poilev, and that, back to you, Mrs. Burton. You testified that you were interviewed for 3 hours by Mr. Staff Sergeant Mitchell?
On my initiation, yes. He came to my office December 20th.
But now, in the previous, when you were here before, the question was asked to you, did you find the investigation harassing when he was questioning you? And this was, he did not interview me as a witness.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I was never advised that I was being interviewed as a witness or anything to that effect. I initiated contact with Mike Frizzell and asked him to come and see me. I had information for him. I had documentation to give him. So he did not indicate that I was a witness or any other terminology that has been used in this committee.
Well, aren't you playing with words here? The question was, did you find the question from Mr.
I did not
Fitzpatrick?
find his behavior harassing. No.
No. Let me read it to you. The question: Did you find the investigation harassing when he was questioning you? Your answer, he did not interview me as a witness, sir.
That was my understanding, Mr. Chairman, that he was not interviewing me as a witness. I would assume he'd tell me if I was being interviewed as a witness. I don't know. I'm not sure what their procedures are.
Okay, then. Mr. Christopherson, 8 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you all again for taking the time to come forward. If I can, the reason it's crucially important for us or a public inquiry or somebody to get to the bottom of these particular issues is because it speaks to whether or not there was an attempted cover-up. And if there wasn't, we need to get a whole lot of people's reputation back. And if there was, that's in some ways a bigger problem than the initial crime. And I think former Nixon would have something. Former President Nixon would have something to say about how that can collapse around you. So we've got to get to the bottom of whether or not these transfers were done to be punishment, to take people away from finding out things, or whether it was just the regular course of business. It matters incredibly. And Ms. Ravine, I appreciate you coming back today. Just to set things right now, you're currently working from home and are being full pay, full benefits, full everything, except you work at home most of the time instead of the office?
That's right.
That's correct.
That's
and it's
correct.
been like that since when?
Since June 05.
Do you ever plan? Are there other people who are in the same work situation?
Not that I'm aware of.
Do you expect this to continue forever?
At this point, I've been diagnosed with PTSD, so that it will continue for at least 2 years.
Okay, so we're getting into the health issue now, and that's my segue, and I'm trying to be as respectful as possible. At any time you think we're crossing the line on your privacy when we're on health, stop answering, okay? I have great respect for your rights in this matter. When asked about your removal from where you were before, we had Deputy Commissioner George say, Ms. Ravine, I'm quoting now, Ms. Ravine had health issues. I believe on her doctor's orders, she has been precluded from working within the office, and I believe there are issues there. We have accommodated her, and as I said, she has been working from home. That would, of course, lead one to believe that the attempt was there to do you a favor, to accommodate a growing or an identified health issue. Now, just to keep things interesting, of course, we have Rosalie Burton, who stated the last time she was here when I put a direct question to her on this issue, she stated, and I again quote, she was declared surplus. So on the one hand, we've got a senior officer saying it was to help you out because of a current personal situation. We've got another person responsible for the restructuring in which the music stopped and you didn't have a seat to sit down on, and your version. So would you bring us up again as to what you believe happened to you and why?
Okay. On January 5th, 2004, I provided a report to Staff Sergeant Lewis. It's a 16-page report that wasn't attached to the letter. On February 16th, I received an email from Assistant Commissioner Gork. He was requesting the names of individuals who had received a copy of the above-noted report. A copy of a draft of the report that I'd prepared had apparently turned up somewhere, and he wanted the names of people who had contributed to the report. I said I wouldn't provide the names unless there was an investigation. February 27th, I was invited to attend the meeting on HR restructuring. The meeting had 25 to 30 directors there at the time. Rosalie Burton flew in from, she was at the time on language training in Quebec City. She flew in from there just for the day. I was the only one who didn't have a name on the overheads. So that was my first inclination that maybe there was something better for me, but I wasn't sure. When she returned from language, April 7, 2004, she informed me that I no longer had a job in the RCMP. Rosalie Burton.
Mm-hmm.
And from that day on, she excluded me from all management meetings and asked that I turn over all my responsibilities to Mr. John Harden, an employee that she had seconded into the RCMP from Treasury Board. She asked that I concentrate all my efforts in finding employment.
Now, were you advised that you were being restructured, that that's why this happened?
She told me it was budget reasons. Okay? Now, 2 weeks before that, I had seen an email from Deputy Commissioner George saying that, and I have a copy of the email, saying that we would be hiring people with new thinking skill, analytical skills. So I challenged that. I said, how can that be? And she said, oh, no, it's just the way it is, that there's no money. So I said, well, you can't just pick somebody and tell them that they no longer have a job. It's processes. So she said, well, I'll go down and see personnel. So on April 22nd, she called me to her office and then served me a letter that you should have in your binder.
Probably do somewhere.
Yeah, probably somewhere. And the letter basically informed me that I was to go to the Public Service Commission and become a priority, basically look for work elsewhere.
Elsewhere, outside the RCMP, but within
outside
the Canadian
the
government.
RCMP.
Can I just, do you have anything really I'm really tight for time, that's all. Can I just, have you got the essence of what you need to say across, or do you need something else?
I think so, that the health part kicked in later.
That's the only question I wanted to get was, when did you first raise the issue of anything to do with your health with any superior in the organization?
This coincided with the same time as the criminal investigation, and because I'd been a key informant, I participated in that a fair amount, and I also had to now confront looking for work outside the Public Service Commission. After 33 years in the organization, I was hurting. There was a lot that was going on.
Do you have a lot of questions in your mind about why this was being done? Were you starting to think?
There was no question in my mind that it was related to this.
And what? I need the words. What related to what? What do you think happened and why? In 1 or 2 sentences, Denise.
Well, the first thing that happened is when Fraser was removed, and he told me about it. He said, "You better get out because Ivanovich is coming after you next." That was in August of 2003. And Burton was a friend of Ivanovich, and basically it just happened.
Okay. I'm going to give you an opportunity to respond, Ms. Burton, but I did want to ask Chief Superintendent Macaulay. Denise Ravine reported to you?
Yes.
Could you just give us your thoughts and what you know of the issue of Ms. Ravine no longer being employed with the RCMP?
The first time she heard about it was after I had left, and it was as she described, she called me the day that she had been in that meeting, and there was no job for her on the wall.
Any other involvement by you in this?
Well, the discussion we had with Mr. Ivanovich, he made it clear to me that they would be looking to push Denise to Treasury Board.
I see.
Was his quote.
Now, I know this, I don't know if courts allow this, I'm not a lawyer, far from it, but let me just ask you, in your opinion, do you believe that she was removed for those reasons, or do you believe it was a legitimate? Is that not?
Well, what do you know, Mr.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, what I do know is that the workforce adjustment process was not followed. There is a public service reverse order of merit process that was highlighted and asked about, and it wasn't followed.
That's fine. Yeah, we're out of time, David.
At some point, she should be given a chance by somebody.
Oh, yeah, we will get back to her. So, okay, Mr. Wisniewski, 8 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. So when I finished off in the last round, we heard that there was a punitive transfer of the whistleblower. There was an OPP investigation we've heard previously, as a result of which Mr. Gauvin and Mr. Ivanovich had to take ethics training, but internally we've now heard there was a punitive transfer. And just for clarity, the Commissioner was Mr. Rogerson?
The Commissioner of the day?
Yes.
It was Commissioner Zaccardelli.
Thank you. Mr. Estabrooks, Was there anything unusual about the process around the access to information request for the Ottawa police investigation, and what were these?
Unusual in what circumstance? Are you asking in time or in?
From the usual process that would take place for an access to information request.
The usual process is that something of only about 50 pages would probably take us 30 days, 60 days legislated under the Act. You can apply for an extension, but no extensions were applied on this. What I noticed was that it took a long time to do this. It took approximately, for 50 pages, about 9 months or more to process.
What would have caused, you'd mentioned that legislatively it should have been 60 days, yet this was delayed for 9 months. What would have caused those delays?
Well, we had numerous, I don't know if I should say interference, but we had a lot of heads up going out. We had things like legal opinions where it went to legal for approximately 6 months and sat there. And it was immediately returned, not immediately, but after the 6 month time period, it came back down, and I think it stayed in our office approximately a week, and it was sent back for a second legal opinion. Surely one legal opinion would suffice on 50 pages. But it just seemed that everything was a stall tactic from the beginning when it started. My colleague Norm Sirois had looked at the file originally, had been asked to do an informal request, I believe, but he could probably answer that question under the previous OIC, who was Superintendent Picard. Under the officer that I was serving under at the time when I was asked to look at this request and process it was Superintendent Pierre Lavoie. I had looked at it, reviewed it, being a senior member, and I had approximately 12 years experience with this kind of file. And he didn't quite agree with what I was going to release, so I was removed from the file, and it was passed to another reviewer. In the long run, it was passed to another reviewer, but at the time I was told he was going to do it, along with the lawyer from Department of Justice, which had been Louis Alberti. So they decided what the final outcome, the final release package was. And I understand that it was quite heavily vetted at the time.
Now, you said, you mentioned Mr. Lavoie. You referenced your many years of experience. Mr. Lavoie, where would he have been previously to arriving just recently at that time at Access to Information?
I believe he came from Deputy Commissioner Govan's office, which would have been Finance. And he was transferred on a promotion. He was an inspector in Finance. He was promoted to superintendent to transfer to our branch as the officer in charge.
You've also used the term stall tactic and interference. Any particular location from which these stall tactics or interference were coming from?
Well, in the branch, we usually have it's set up so that when we do have requests going out, there are heads up given to ESML, which is the Ministerial Liaison Unit, and to Media Relations. Included, I was told to also send heads up with the package, actually what we were going to send out, to Deputy Commissioner Govan and to Assistant Commissioner at the time, George, which is, they weren't on the usual list of where we sent things, but Superintendent Lavoie insisted that they go there.
So that was somewhat unusual.
To have, it's very unusual to have someone that is named in a report to be able to read what we're going to release or send out and to be able to comment on it.
And then we had a 9-month stall. Sir, on Wednesday, April 18th, I tabled a motion in Public Accounts Committee for you to appear before the committee and also requesting a number of ATIP documents. That Friday, April 20th, just before the offices of Access to Information at the RCMP were closing at 4:55 p.m., I understand Mr. Govan's executive assistant showed up demanding to have document A5. can you relate these very strange circumstances that occurred after my motion Public Accounts Committee for a number of documents for an executive assistant of Mr. Gauvin to show up at Access to Information demanding a document? And what exactly is this document A5?
Well, I understand I was off that day. I'm a casual employee now, so I usually am only in 2 days a week. But I was told when I returned to work that I believe it's Inspector Cowan had shown up at approximately 4:55 on the Friday and had been led into the secure area by a Corporal Swim. He was escorted to Acting Sergeant Lee Duchesne. Lee has basically, since I retired, she has taken over my position. She spoke with him, and he had said that he had a piece of paper that he identified as an email that he was looking for allegations that I had made against Deputy Gauvin, and as far as the ATIP interference running within our ATIP files. At that time, Acting Sergeant Duchesne phoned Sergeant Jeff Hurry on his cell phone, who was with policy, and he spoke with the inspector and explained to him how the proper procedure would be to access. And at that time, he was escorted. I understand he was escorted out of the secure area. I'm not quite sure what he was looking for. Obviously, he was looking for information that I was going to give before the committee.
It's an incredibly serious set of circumstances. The committee in that motion requested a number of documents, and you have Mr. Gauvin's executive assistant showing up just before close demanding documents, not following normal procedures. Did you keep a copy of this particular document A5?
Now, I'm not sure if he was after the particular document that I have. When I went back to work part-time as a casual employee, I was asked to look at the pension file again by Corporal Luc Poulin, and he suggested that I take a look because I was familiar with all these files. And when I was going through the files, I noticed there were documents missing that I had written with no rhyme or reason to why it would be missing, because there were typed memos that I had put on were there, but there was a particular one that I had written, handwritten, which I have brought with me. It's not on the file that we can find. I managed to keep, well, I kept a copy when I left. When I retired, I kept my notes, and I've gone through them, and I have a copy, it's a photocopy of the A5, which has been translated for the House.
Why would you have kept a copy of this particular document?
Well, I kept this copy, and I also kept a copy of the memo I had written. I had written a memo to the OIC of the day, which was Superintendent Lavoie, about the unethical conduct, in my opinion, of Deputy Gauvin being involved with the files, because it's highly unusual to be put in that situation. At the time when I left, I was frustrated with the way things were going, and so I had a feeling this may come at some point. So I had kept my notes and kept copies of just my documents, what I had done.
Okay, before we go any further now, I want to make sure this document, does it relate to the issues that are before the committee?
Yes.
Well, I'd like to see it tabled. You got it in both officials. I assume that's your intention?
There's another point of order. We've just heard reference that documents that perhaps were part of the package that I'd previously requested that at this committee, that files have gone missing. And I'm in a bit of a quandary how we should proceed in these sets of circumstances.
Well, let's deal with the first issue first. So you're going to table those documents that you have with you now?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So
I can table the A5. It is translated. So.
A5 translated. And was there something else too that you had, sir?
I have a copy of the memo that I had written about Deputy Gauvin, and I could table that.
Table that too, please. So I'll instruct the clerk to get that now. Now,
I think, Mr. Chairman, that Mr. Bean also made reference to an email that should be tabled as well. When she was talking to Mr. Christopherson.
I was of the impression that email may have already been tabled. Was it not tabled? Okay, I'll get you to table that also, Mr. Ravine.
It's not translated, though.
No, it's tabled with the clerk, and the clerk will look after having it translated, and we'll have it circulated to the committee. And now, the second issue is the saga of the missing documents. And your allegation, Mr. Estabrooks, is that there are documents that were in the file that ought to have been in the file, but for some reason weren't in the file.
That's correct. When I went back, there should have been the A5 that I wrote because it is dated and it is noted to that file, and it's not there.
So this A5 that was supposed to be in the file, was somebody took it out of the file, but we're going to get it right now.
You will receive a copy. It's not the original.
No, that's fine.
No,
that's fine.
It will be a photocopy.
That's fine.
My copy.
But are there other documents that weren't in the file too that you're aware of?
I understand from a recent telephone conversation with the Access to Information investigator that's currently investigating the delay on this file. There was a document missing that I wasn't aware of, but it was apparently a document. It's another A5 that I had prepared for the OIC, and it's not on the file, so they are questioning where that is at the present time. However, I do not have a copy of that.
Okay, and just for the benefit of the people around this table, does the term A5 have any significance? What does A5 mean in that?
An A5 is an inter-office transit slip. It can be either typed or handwritten. Pink slip is another name for it, not the one where they would get rid of you, but it's a pink form.
We don't want too many of them around.
No, we don't want too many of those around.
Okay. Well, I would. We will follow up with the clerk on the missing documents, and we'll have people back here before us to follow up on that. We're going to have to get a very clear explanation of why that occurred. So we'll get those documents tabled and that document tabled. And Mrs. Sgro.
Just to clarify, though, that was, I believe, several weeks ago when we requested, or the committee requested, I think there were 8 or 9 files on Levinsky's motion. Have we not received any of those files to date?
We've got them all.
We've got them all, Mrs. Sgro, and the trouble with them, some of them they're fairly lengthy, and we're sorting them out as to. We're not getting them all translated. We're talking to the members of the steering committee. Okay, Mr. Fitzpatrick, 8 minutes.
Yeah, I've got a question for Inspector Waugh. You're an experienced investigator. If an organization's being investigated, an experienced investigator walks in and interviews somebody in that organization for a 3-hour period, and at the beginning of the interview a tape recorder is turned on, and it carries on for that length of time, wouldn't you find it very unusual for that person to walk away from that meeting saying, well, I was not a witness?
Yes.
Thank you very much, sir. Now I want to get back to the pension issue. Morneau Sabico. The original business case, the sign-off on that business case for outsourcing, I'd address that to Mr. Rogerson because he worked in that area for many, many years, and I think he's an expert in that area as well. Would you expect the controller to sign off on something like that, a major contract of that nature?
I'm not aware of who had the delegated authorities at that time. It depends who the commissioner delegates signing authority down through to. Right. So would the controller sign that off? It would depend on who had the delegated authorities to sign it.
I believe it was Mr. Govan at that time. So,
well, if he had the authority to sign it off, he would have signed it off. It would have been, I believe the normal process is in any contract in procurement, as you know, we only have up to basically $25,000 for contract authority. Thereafter, it goes through Public Works.
Right. But before it went to Public Works, somebody like Mr. Govan certainly would have had to approve or sign off on that business case, you would think.
Well, yeah, I can't speak for him, but I can tell you my previous experience there with respect to the internal control unit I put in place at the time really was to review such contracts.
Okay. Okay. My understanding is that in the RCMP, before it went off to the Public Works, that Morneau Sabico was involved in calculating the actual estimates for this sort of contract, and they may even been involved in actually writing up the request for proposal, the specifications that went into that proposal, and lo and behold, when the tendering process works its way through, guess who bids on it? Morneau Sabico. And guess who wins the bid? Morneau Sabico. In your experience, would you call this standard practice in procurement?
Not at all. We're supposed to set our own statement of work and our statement of requirements and our request for proposals based on our internal experts along with some others to address. And no, we would not give anyone a competitive inside edge, because then it's not a fair and open contract.
My thinking would be if a contractor in a well-run organization tried to get inside information and assist the process, people in charge just close the door on those people and tell them to turn their tail and head the other way, because this isn't the way we do business. Is that a correct assumption?
That is correct.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you another question. Mr. Krupe was here and Mr. Gauvin was here. Mr. Gauvin told us in this committee that he took away Mr. Krupe's contracting powers. But then what we discovered after that decision was made, Mr. Krupe carried on as if nothing had occurred. He kept on contracting. He found a friend in the CAC group that could help him out with his contracts, and may have pushed through as many as $6 million worth of contracts. And Mr. Gauvin told us that he wasn't aware of this situation. But is that, with the checks and controls that you helped to set up in that area, wouldn't it be very, very unusual if the guy in charge of this thing, after he's terminated the guy's right to contracting, that he works through $6 million worth of contracts and he wouldn't know about it?
Well, it would either be the chief financial officer or the senior full-time financial officer who was in charge of financial services, or it was also the person in charge of asset and procurement for the RCMP. If they failed to brief up to Mr. Gauvin, he could be kept in the dark. However, I would say that was a highly sensitive area at the time with respect to the pension outsourcing. I guess it depends on when the audit was done. It depends on when the criminal investigation was done. Right. Because I could tell you that from my experience, if that was high risk, which it is, that there would be an active monitoring unit on reviewing how those things were allocated and how the contracts were awarded.
Yeah, I'm absolutely baffled that the guy in charge of this would terminate his contracting service and just let him carry on in his own little department without any controls or checks put in place at all, and then comes to this committee and said he didn't know he was doing it. Like, it seems incredibly difficult concept to accept or believe.
Well, in our world, we empower people to make decisions through the delegated authorities. If those people failed to brief up to Mr. Gauvin, then they should be held accountable. If he was unaware, and if his people that were working in those respective areas were still conducting those businesses and not briefing him on that regard, then he was kept in the dark.
But if the RCMP procurement frontline staff knew full well that Mr. Krupe was continuing to issue contracts and negotiate these contracts and had a revolving door going on with it, wouldn't you find it unusual that with that large number of people in the RCMP procurement aware of this thing going on, that they would not have brought this attention to the chief financial officer of the organization?
I would hope they would, but with respect to Morneau Sabico, if my memory serves me correct, and from what I've heard, is that with respect to that particular firm, that there was already business being conducted with them, and therefore there was an implied contract. And as a result, the decision was made to sole source it to Morneau Sabico because of the implied contract already in place. So therefore, Morneau Sabico was awarded the contract based on the fact that if offer acceptance and consideration was already in place, and under business law, they could take us to civil proceedings and say that there was an implied contract to start with. And I think, to my knowledge, therefore, they did not go through the normal contracting and procurement procedures with respect to awarding of that contract. Did Dominic Krupe sole source that? I'm not sure. Was Dominic Krupe involved with working with Monaco Cervico up front? Absolutely. Did the organization take a risk managed approach and say, will we be served civilly and therefore end up with two separate contracts? Because if we go to the public tendering process and another person is awarded, then would Monaco Cervico stand a legal challenge with respect to saying there's already an implied contract, we've done work on this?
But you would agree with me, it would be very bad practice for procurement if the main contractor was involved right in the front end in drawing up the specifications and the estimates on any procurement process, that would just be a bad practice. And I think every taxpayer in the country should be concerned if that was standard practice.
Well, you'd have an insider's edge because you'd know the organization, how it's structured, the true cost, the additional costs. And as you know, when you go to the competitive process and people bid on it, a committee is struck and we award points as to the credibility of the organization, their functionality, and whether in fact you structure what you require through MERCS, through our contracting bidding process, and you know, because NAFTA kicks in as well, that it has to be you know, an in-house process in order for people to actually be able to bid in a fair process. In this case, what you're alluding to is there was already insider trading going on. They already had the inside track. They also had a competitive edge. So would they have also been able to outbid the other competitors? I would say that they would have had a competitive edge. And since we didn't go to a competitive contract, I don't know if somebody else would have came in cheaper.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Fitzpatrick. Thank you. Just before that concludes round one. We're going to go to round two. I just have one or two questions before we go to round two. Back to you, Mrs. Burton. I know we've touched this question before, but your evidence is before this committee that Ms. Ravine was eliminated because of a reorganization. How many other positions within the Royal Canadian Mounted Police were eliminated because of this reorganization?
Well, Mr. Chair, I can only speak to the ones within the area that I inherited.
Just your area.
And there were 12. And it was due to a budget pressure of $1.3 million for the fiscal year 04-05. Now, for the committee here, I'll apologize. It's not been translated. I don't have those resources available to me. But I did bring supporting documentation on that for the committee's reference, and I'll certainly provide that to you. And if I may take an opportunity, Mr. Chair, to indicate that the Workforce Adjustment Directive was applied. I engaged a Public Service Staff Relations Advisor to make sure that this was done correctly. So that was done, and she was present at the meeting where Ms. Ravine received her letter. The other thing that I wanted to clarify is that when John Harton came in to the organization, it was to replace somebody, Peter Huey, a different director. It wasn't to take on the work that Ms. Ravine had done.
Who replaced Ms. Ravine?
To my knowledge, no one. No one under my watch, Mr. Chair.
Well, okay, if no one to replace her, what was she doing before she was replaced? If you need anyone to replace her, what was she up to?
The conversation that I had with Ms. Ravine was very limited. The interaction was very limited. What she told me in the fall of 2003 is that she had started an A-base review, but it was too complex and she couldn't finish it. That she was dealing now with John Spice. Now, John Spice is an assistant commissioner in charge of the Ethics and Integrity Office, and that's confidential. You can't pry into matters when employees are dealing with that. So I also had a handover with Fraser McCauley before he went on his secondment to D&D, and he didn't indicate to me at any time that she should be protected, that she was on that list and should be taken off. I dealt with the information I had available to me, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mrs. Scroll, 5 minutes.
When you were here before, you said, I have no knowledge of the A-base and have not seen the A-base that Ms. Ravine was doing or had done.
Excuse me, I have not seen the A-base.
Okay,
she referenced it very briefly,
Thank you.
But she didn't provide it to me.
Ms. Ravine, is that correct?
It's not correct. I have a copy of an email that Ms. Burton sent to me the same day that she told me that I no longer had a job. This email reads in part as follows. Denise, you'll recall our discussions when I first arrived as the acting DG, OR&E, when you explained to me that the scope of the A-base review was very large and that you'd prepared a discussion paper to Fraser. Can you share the discussion paper and your information collected? Ms. Burton then sent an email to a colleague of mine in which she stated, Reg, thanks for taking on the internal project management of the A-base review. As first steps, can you please clean up the discussion document attached? I can table these, but they're not translated.
Ms. Rivian, if you could just table the document, even though it's not translated, and it could get translated, just so that I can move on. As you've seen, time is very limited here.
Okay.
Ms. Burton, a question for you, if you could answer it relatively quickly, I think in a yes or no. During your employment tenure with the RCMP, has anyone filed harassment complaints against you?
No, there's been no harassment complaints against me.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rogerson, clearly some of the things that we've heard and is recognized the pain that you have felt after so many years of service to a wonderful organization that we all very much love and respect. But I have often heard in the policing circles, the RCMP circles, that there's more or less, the hidden rule that if you're part of the family, you don't talk outside of the family about internal issues or any issues to anyone outside of the RCMP. Something short of a gag order against anyone talking. I mean, I can understand it, and you're raising these issues, and am I correct when I ask you that question?
No, I think if you looked at the letter I sent in January, I think with our RCMP Act and the other regulatory bodies that we have watching us, even the Financial Admin Act, that I encourage people to come forward within our own system, first, because we do have a pretty structured process, and through my letter, as you'll see in January, that I encourage people to come forward if they had concerns, and in fact, if they don't come forward, i.e., if Mike Frizzell didn't follow that transaction, then he could be subject to a code of conduct for allowing something to be concealed, right? So it's a double-edged sword. But I think, to be honest with you, as an appropriate officer, I'm accountable for 2,200 people or more in headquarters. I might have 30 files. I mean, that's less than 2% of code of conduct issues. By and large, we have an excellent system, and now you have the Federal Accountability Act, of course, which protects people from to at least allow them to come forward. The family room aspect, I guess if there's collusion amongst people to set up a career assassination in order to encourage them to leave the organization, then yes, probably, if you have collusion amongst individuals, that can take effect. And in our policy, that's called abuse of authority, and we look into it. And from my recollection, we have an excellent process. If people go outside the box ahead of the schedule, then usually that's a sign that the organization as a whole is having issues. Leaks usually occur when, as you term whistleblower, I'd like to call them right doers, are suppressed over time. The leaks eventually seek out of an organization. I think what you're seeing is a private institution reflection into a public institution when you looked at the fall of Enron, Pamelet, REX, and the rest of them. So that's what you're seeing unfolding. A very select few abusing their authority, and somehow it's been blown into a proportion that it's rampant and systemic throughout the organization. I would say that it's not rampant. It's certainly not systemic. It's a very select few individuals that have taken their authority and have decided to preserve their chair as opposed to the image of the organization. That is my perception of what has transpired, and as I say, it's a reflection of days gone by. I will say that under our present Commissioner, Bev Bussin, I am here today with her full backing. As a matter of fact, she said the truth. is like a sword and a shield. You know, it will defend you and it will help you get through issues. I didn't go through her to have anything vetted, and what you're hearing today is strictly from me, with her encouragement for me to come forward here today.
When you have indicated that what happened to you previously, Staff Sergeant Frizzell had read out to us a mission statement at the very beginning of these hearings, and I kind of thought that was odd. But as the time has progressed, I've seen more and more of why he was so proud of that mission statement. But if when we have heard testimony about Mr. Ivanovich and what happens to him, well, he's hired and he's kind of let go quietly. He wasn't fired. He just decided to leave. Mr. Krupe turns around and gets, I think, 18 months of pay and a reference letter that gets him a job currently with CSIS. Those kinds of statements make it very difficult for us to think that people are coming forward and something appropriate is happening there.
Well, here's our values statement for you. It says integrity, honesty, professionalism, compassion, respect, and accountability. In the organization such as the RCMP, we're not about headhunting. We're not about career assassination. We're about trying to help people move on to another, through to another life. It's about compassion, right? We have an organization where our statements are, you mess up, you fess up, and you dress up. And then we go before the adjudication board, which looks at what transpired plus the mitigating factors. Generally with a well-seasoned officer or a member of the force who has 20, 29, 32 years service, it's not about career assassination. It's generally about this person has messed up, they fessed up, and they dressed up. How do we provide them an opportunity to continue with their career within the organization and outside the organization? You have Deputy Commissioner George here. She's one of the leaders with respect to duty to accommodate. She's been a champion for our force in the last number of years that I've known her. I mean, with respect, everything I do with respect to people around me is duty to accommodate.
Okay, thank you. Point of order. Thank you, Ms. Sgro.
Sure. Point of order.
Point of order, Mr. Wisniewski.
There was a requirement for Mr. Krupe a number of weeks ago to provide his reference letter, which allowed him to get his new job at the Canadian Security Establishment. I have not seen that in the records. Has that letter of reference and whoever provided him with that come forward to the committee?
Okay, the clerk has informed me that we have not got it yet, and I will ask the clerk to follow up immediately and ask why we haven't got it. So, Mr. Williams, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Assistant Commissioner Lang, you have been ignored this afternoon, but you were mentioned fairly extensively in Assistant Commissioner Rogerson's opening statement, including, I think he quoted some emails that you had written. Do you agree with the opening statement of Assistant Commissioner Rogerson as it pertains to you and how you were mentioned in that?
Yes, I do, but there are a number of points that require clarification. I've been waiting to answer those points of clarification.
Okay, will it take you long?
A few minutes, yes.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I ask that we would, since it's a clarification of an opening statement, that I be given the indulgence to allow him to do that without affecting my time.
We'll give you an extra minute or two, Mr. Williams, but I'd ask Mr. Lang to try and be ask everyone to be as brief as possible, because it is frustrating for the members. You can see we have only a certain amount of time. I know these are important issues, and it is difficult.
Yeah, I can talk very fast. Again, to put this in perspective, in June of 2005, I was a superintendent of technical operations. I have no knowledge of this investigation. What I've known about the Project Probity investigation, I've learned from the committee hearings and the Blue Notes. It was kept as a sensitive investigation run by Inspector Roy, so the sharing of that information was not done with a lot of people. In about May, when Assistant Commissioner Gork was scheduled to go to Leon, I got named as the interim liaison for him on this investigation to deal with the administrative matters that Inspector Roy spoke to. At about this time on June the 17th, I get a call from Assistant Commissioner George, as she was at the time, outlining a complaint to me about the harassing behavior or alleged harassing behavior of Sergeant Frizzell, and asking that something be done about it. Very shortly thereafter, I walked down the hall to Inspector Roy's office, and we have a discussion about it. I am not given direction at that time, and when I talk to direction, I have influence from Assistant Commissioner George to get something going on this. But at that point, I received no direction from her to say, do this, do that, do this. That order came from Assistant Commissioner Gork, and I believe he's already testified to that. Inspector Roy and I had quite a discussion about what we do with this now, because he needed Sergeant Purcell Mike to stay on the investigation, to clean up what he had left. So when people see the order and what is missing from the order from what Deputy Commissioner George thinks should have been in it, based on her understanding, and Inspector Roy and myself, that order was drafted by myself in consultation with Inspector Roy and in consultation with Sergeant Frizzell's new boss at CCAPS to get everything in place for him to be moved. As Assistant Commissioner Rogerson stated, this was not about character assassination. This was a delicate situation. Deputy George had brought in the H word, harassment, into the game, into the situation. Excuse me for calling it a game. Brought the H word into the situation. We have strict policies and regulations and guidelines dealing with how we deal with harassment. So my delicate job here, after talking with Mr. Gork the next day, was to figure out, he wanted a written order done, and that was clear. And I think, yes, on Monday, this was enough as far as he was concerned. Based on the previous actions of Sergeant Frizzell and his interrelation with Inspector Roy on avenues of investigation, he wanted it dealt with. It was over. My understanding at that time was the investigation was over. It was wrapping up. All that was left to done was packaging up of emails and those sort of things. So we don't hand out written orders every day. I don't come into work in the morning and have my list of orders. A written order to someone is a very serious thing within the RCMP, because it shows that you haven't followed verbal direction and is the next step to, we got to do something more with this person. Well, I didn't have enough from the conversation that I had with Deputy George and the confirmation I had with Inspector Roy that the harassment, the obsessive and aggressive behavior was truly substantiated, that I could go ahead and demand Sergeant Frizzell take what's called a special medical assessment from Health Services. If I had felt in my brief time that I had to deal with it that it was there, I could have gone to Health Services and demanded. And I made a draft of the initial order because there's not a template for them. I had to make it up kind of on the go and spit out in the order what he needed to stop doing based on what I had learned, and what he needed to continue doing, and then that he needed to go on. So that's why there's some confusion around what's in the order and what some people think should have been in the order. It's because that was developed after I had the discussion with the Assistant Commissioner George, after I then had a discussion with Assistant Commissioner Gork, who said, make it a written order, make it happen, have it done by Monday. Then Inspector Roy and I went through the details of what does he need to do to finish off and finish off, to put what he was supposed to be doing to bed. And a day was applicable for him to go back to his old post. I think someone else has testified that he had been gone for a year and there just wouldn't be a seat for him. So I had to talk to the incoming or the receiving inspector to have him there. Most of the conversation that I had with Sergeant Frizzell during the serving of the order was stuff that I couldn't refute. I didn't know the investigation, so his complaints of not being heard, not being listened to, being stymied or turned back, no one wanting to listen to them. It was what I believed at the time was something being having tunnel vision, whatever, on the file, and sort of substantiating what other people were saying, but I was not in a position to second guess all those things. And that was why the order was written as it was by myself, that Assistant Commissioner Gork has ordered these things, because in order for the order to be lawful, it has to have grounds to it. And I wasn't in a position to contradict the legal stuff and the investigative avenues on the investigation, because I wasn't supposed to know that. And that's why the order was written as it was, that it was Assistant Commissioner Gork making it, and I'm doing it on his behalf, and this is what must be done, blah, 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 in a step. Hopefully that clarifies it in as quick as possible.
Well, thank you very much. And Assistant Commissioner, therefore Deputy Commissioner George, was aware of the facts that the order was being served, why it was being served, on what grounds it was being served, and so on.
Not until after the service.
Okay.
There is a timeline in there that is slightly confusing. That I got one of the email messages that Assistant or Deputy George, excuse me, refers to as an email message at 11:23 asking for the follow-up of what's happening.
I thought you told me that you had discussions with Deputy Commissioner George about removing Staff Sergeant Frizzell, and then you went and implemented that.
No, I had discussions about the complaint, about the facts.
Okay, your
Sorry.
discussions with her about the complaint.
Yes.
That resulted in the removal order. Your discussions with her about the complaint were before you issued the removal order.
Okay, to be very clear, Deputy George had no role to play in the building of that order.
I don't want to worry about role. I said, did you had a discussion with her regarding the complaints?
Yes.
And from there, at a subsequent time, an order was issued to remove Staff Sergeant Frizzell?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. There are clear rules within the RCMP. When a harassment allegation charge is being made against a member, there are clear rules as to how that shall be disposed of. Were these rules even instigated or ever followed? Like for Staff Sergeant Frizzell, when you had this allegation of harassment laid against him?
Yes, not to my knowledge. It was the investigation, or the complaint was referred to as borderline harassment. The problem in this particular situation was we have an RCMP member investigating other RCMP members during this investigation.
Chief Superintendent McCauley, you were also mentioned in Mr. Rogerson's report. As far as it pertains to you, do you agree with what he said?
Yes.
And you have no disagreement?
No.
And I think Staff Sergeant Frizzell, you were also mentioned in Mr. Rogerson's report. As far as it pertains to you, do you have any disagreement? Do you agree with what he said?
I have no dispute, no.
No dispute whatsoever. Okay, well, thank you very much. Mr. McCauley, Ms. Ravine said that when you were talking to her, you said, Mr. Ivanovich is coming after you next. Do you agree that you would have said that?
Yeah, I told her, well, it wasn't in those exact, they're coming, you'll be next.
Okay, you'll be next. Okay. Mr. Easterbrooks, you said it was highly unusual for people named in an access information that was going to be released, people who were named in there, to review the document before it was released. The people whose names were in there, did they make any suggestions for changes to the ATIP before it was released?
I believe that the Deputy Govan had in a memo, there's a memo that was written to the Superintendent Lavoie with opinions on what should be released and what shouldn't be.
So
that's why I had replied and was getting frustrated with the whole situation.
So, was it Assistant Commissioner Govan actually made some suggestions about changing the ATIP release based on, even though he was named in the release in the ATIP himself?
That's what I believe. It's Deputy Commissioner Govan, but yes, there were suggestions made.
Okay, Ms. Ravine, Ms. Burton said that you received a work stop adjustment. I think that's either compensation or some kind of formality about whatever it is when your position is terminated. Did you receive that?
I received that on April 22nd, 2004.
And you were removed from your position when?
Immediately. Basically, no management meetings. She took the work away and told me to focus on finding a job.
Okay, so there was no adjustment. It was set in a stop work order, right?
No adjustment.
Okay. Mr. Easterbrooks, you mentioned documents were removed from these files in your office, so the office in which you worked. You have no idea who removed these documents?
No, I don't, sir.
Okay. Ms. Burton, I'm going back to Mr. Fitzpatrick's point, and the chair also asked you some questions on this on your testimony on April the 18th, when Mr. Fitzpatrick was trying to find out what relationship or what connection or discussions you'd had with Staff Sergeant Frizzell. And I know it was a kind of a heated interchange, but nonetheless, the question was, did you find the investigation harassing when he questioned you? And you replied, he did not interview me as a witness, sir. Now, in your opening statement today, you made reference to the fact that you had talked to Staff Sergeant Frizzell on quite a number of occasions, I believe. And now we understand one was actually with a tape recording of 3 hours. But at this committee, you're required to give fulsome answers. Do you believe that he did not interview me as a witness, sir, was a fulsome answer as far as your interaction with Staff Sergeant Frizzell on this case?
I answered I did not believe he interviewed me as a witness because I initiated that conversation.
You weren't asked that question.
So I guess I misunderstood what constitutes witness.
You weren't asked about a witness. You volunteered the fact that you were interviewed as a witness. You were asked, the question is, the insurance program is chaired by Deputy Commissioner of the Central Region. No, sorry, Mr. Fitzpatrick said, did you find the investigation harassing when he was questioning you? You have said today you had a number of conversations with Staff Sergeant Frizzell. You were the one that brought in the concept he did not interview me with a witness. My question to you was, did you give us a fulsome answer?
Thank you, and I note your concern, very much so. First thing is, when I read that transcript, I noted, geez, I didn't answer directly yes or no. First, I did not find my interactions with, no, I need to clear this, Mr. Chair. I did not find my interactions with Mike Frizzell harassing. Second, I initiated the conversation. He came to see me. After we talked for a while, he asked if he could record. We had a taped conversation. I was not advised I was a witness or anything else, so maybe it's me not understanding the semantics of the situation, and I'll apologize for that.
I asked, Mr. Chairman, if that was a fulsome answer that she gave. I didn't ask for the context. Did you give us a fulsome answer at that time?
In retrospect, I guess I could have been more fulsome.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Waugh, 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je voudrais m'adresser à Madame.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for Ms. Burton. I was listening to Mr. Williams, and you had a 3-hour conversation with a taped conversation with Mr. Frizzell, and you're saying you did not believe you were being interviewed as a witness. I have a lot of problem believing that, but that's not what I want to ask you a question about. What I'd like to come back to is this. You said that on April 18th, in September 2003, when I had not yet been appointed acting director, 12 employees had been considered surplus, including Denise Ravine, et cetera, et cetera. Of the 12 employers who were declared surplus, was this only in your department?
I can only speak to the ones in my department. It was the budget file that I inherited from the executive assistant of my predecessor, Fraser McCauley.
Parce que, excusez-moi.
I brought the documentation that I had that prefaced that decision.
Oui.
So I'm not sure if there were other. I recall in the file there were other areas that were subject to cuts, but I did not follow that closely.
Oui, mais il y en avait combien dans votre...
How many were declared surplus in your department?
C'était la question que je vous posais.
Oh, that was my question. Were the 12 in your department? You said that 12 employees were declared surplus. You were acting Director General. And are you saying that you didn't look at the files and your predecessor did not inform you of the reasons why these persons had been declared surplus?
In the file it shows a memorandum from the Deputy Commissioner of the Chief Financial Officer, Paul Gauvin, and it's a lengthy answer, so I'll apologize, to the Chief Human Resource Officer indicating a $1.3 million shortfall for fiscal year 0405. Also in there is a file that was prepared on or before September 11, 2003, where there's cuts to be made that impact individuals. I received that file from the executive assistant, Lise Bisson, who worked for Fraser McCauley. In the handover meeting that I asked Fraser McCauley for, he did not indicate or provide me an explanation of that.
Basically, what you're telling me is that you don't know how the decision was taken. What you're saying is that there were budget cutbacks and that really, it was simply a budget issue. These were not real people you were dealing with. So as Human Resources Director, you dealt with this blindly on an economic level without asking yourself any questions. That's basically what you're telling us.
Absolutely a humane response to that. While people receive the workforce adjustment letter, they're still on full salary. They're advised that their first priority is finding their next position. While they're still on full salary, we do everything we can to accommodate them. I facilitated discussions with Assistant Commissioner Kevin Mole for meaningful work for Denise Ravine and the other employees.
I'm sorry, but that's not the sense of my question. As Human Resources Director, a decision was taken and you had to implement it in your department. And of course you had to act as a consequence. So my question is, do you have a say in your budget? When the decision was taken, perhaps you didn't take it, but you can decide how your budget is being spent. It's as if you told me that the Human Resources Director had no say whatsoever in the decision. It was taken from above.
A budget, but how you allocate that. So if it weren't cuts there, it would be cuts elsewhere. So if it's not those 12 employees, which 8 or 12 salaries add up to the amount that you need to reduce by.
Mais est-ce que vous allez voir ailleurs s'il y a des compressions? Est-ce que vous vérifiez?
Did you see whether there were cutbacks elsewhere? Did you see whether these cutbacks were valid? I'm the head of a department, and if I'm told that 12 positions are cut, well, I'll say, oh, it doesn't matter. There are cutbacks everywhere. But really, I think I would see how these cutbacks would affect the people in my department. Of course I'd have a say in the matter. But you're telling me that even if they told you that 12 more positions would be cut, you would simply not react. All you'd say was that, well, there are cutbacks elsewhere as well.
Serious thing. This is people's livelihoods. It's not a decision that's taken lightly. And there are other areas that are cut or cut back.
Before we go to Mr. Sweet, I just have one quick question to you, Mr. Staff Sergeant McCauley. We heard the story about Rosalie Burton inheriting this budget deficit from her predecessor. Her predecessor, I understand, was you, and that's the reason why Ms. Ravine lost her job. Is that correct?
Ms. Ravine was never workforce adjusted under my tenure, under my time there. The meeting that Ms. Burton is referring to probably lasted less than 4 minutes. She arrived at the meeting place. Elise Bisson was there with me. The first question we started talking about, she advised me that she couldn't tell me anything. She had been advised that everything was secret. I said, thank you very much. I got up and left the room. Ms. Ravine was a HR planner. We were bringing planners in. She was involved with Treasury Board around the HR planning. Wasn't a position to be eliminated at that time in our history.
Mr. Sweet, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share your same concern around this. 33 years of service. Could you please just tell the committee, Ms. Ravine, the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder came directly from this instance?
Well, it's been 4 years. So there's been a sick leave absence and then coming back to work, and then as others have, I've been consumed with the file. It's a very big and complicated file. I maintain the other job now through home, and then I have a big family, so eventually it takes its toll. And when I came back to work, I wanted to come back to work, and we had a meeting with Deputy Commissioner George. Ron Lewis attended the meeting with me, and Deputy Commissioner George would have liked me to retire. I wasn't prepared to retire. They didn't have anything to offer me. I had to find my own job. I even had to go to a lawyer. So it's an accumulation.
Yeah, thank you. Staff Sergeant Frizzell, did the Insurance Committee minutes show that approval had been given to move $540,000 to the pension fund as Barbara George requested from Great West Life?
The minutes showed that they did have authority.
Pardon me?
The minutes showed that they did have authority.
Why the discrepancy then between that and what Rosalie Burton has testified?
I don't know.
Ms. Burton, did you or anyone under the your direction change the minutes of an Insurance Committee meeting to indicate that the approval had been given to return funds to the pension fund when no such approval had been given?
I did not change any minutes, and I did not know of anyone who did change minutes.
You have no knowledge of that whatsoever?
What I do know is several months ago, a gentleman named Gary Roy came to me, and he said, he said, the reps are biting me because of minutes of a meeting. I said to him, did you follow due process? I mean, there's a process for any minutes of meetings. They're drafted, they're sent out for comments and revisions, and then they're published as final. He said yes, and I said, well, that was the opportunity to look at the minutes, so I wasn't overly concerned. That's what I know about minutes of meetings, sir.
Staff Sergeant Frizzell, you've testified in the past that Rosalie Burton and Barbara George were persons of interest in this investigation. Is that correct?
There are people that we needed more information from, yes.
Okay. And Mr. Leroy, Rosalie Burton had mentioned that you contacted her and that even though she's not a uniformed member of the RCMP, that in her opening remarks she mentioned that you gave her quite a detailed outline of the investigation, where it was at, and even criticized one of your colleagues' behavior. Could you explain that to us, please?
First of all, I never contacted Ms. Rosalie Burton, and this is in my notes that I gave. I did a submission in tab 12. I have my notes from the 7th of June from the call that I received from Ms. Burton, who complained about the behavior of Sergeant Mike Frizzell, and I can read my notes. They're very short. She said she had received several complaints that he is seeing some of her people, such as DG Caron, in complaints and disputes issues as a member of the RCMP, as opposed to being impartial like an investigator should be. She said that he requested a meeting with her that is set for June 17th. And at that point, I explained that I was not aware of this. And if it is the case, he's doing this on his own, not as a representative of this investigation. I further explained that we are in the report writing phase, which will be presented to the Commissioner and then to the Senior Executive Committee on June 27th. And our findings will be presented, and then the RCMP will be seized with taking action.
Yeah. What was your reasoning for giving that much detail of the situation in the report at the moment to Ms. Burton?
I'm sorry? Can you repeat that?
I was just wondering what the rationale would be of giving that much of a detail of the situation of the investigation to Ms. Burton.
I don't recall giving any details of the investigation.
Okay, well, we'll see it afterwards in the blues, which you just mentioned. Now, I don't have a copy of the blues, obviously, today, but earlier you said that it was in a discussion that Mr. Leroy had initiated with you, that the conversation had kind of developed around Staff Sergeant Frizzell. Didn't you say that, Ms. Burton?
No, I'm sorry. I called Inspector Roy about the voicemail and asked his advice about whether or not to have the meeting with Mike Frizzell. He advised me no. He told me of the schedule of briefings. He told me that Mike Frizzell probably wasn't speaking on behalf of the investigation. And then he went on to say he was having problems with that guy. That, I said, initiated well, I'm having problems keeping the unit together. People are, one person ran off site, upset.
That's fine. We've heard that before.
The stress is, yeah.
Thank you. Barbara George, I wanted to give you one more opportunity to clarify your testimony from February 21st. You said that I can state with absolute finality that it was neither Commissioner Zaccardelli nor me who had anything whatsoever to do with, as you say, the removal of Staff Sergeant Frizzell. Then Mr. Reznicki asked, can you tell us who it was? And then you replied, no, I am not aware of who it was. You just want to speak to that based on the testimony and evidence that we've heard?
I will gladly speak to that. I'll gladly speak to that. Sir, thank you for the opportunity. As we've all heard from Chief Superintendent Lang and others, there was a lot going on at that time. Chief Superintendent Lang just, I think, clarified that it was Inspector Gork who worked with him to write that memo. There was some confusion, I guess, or concern as to what was going into the memo. I've got an affidavit here from Inspector Roy, which outlines all of the concerns and interactions that he had having to do with Sergeant Frizzell and the dealings leading up to it, and as to the difficulties that he had at that time. And I believe the whole committee has this document. We just received it this afternoon, and I certainly would exhort everybody to read it. You don't have the document? You should have this document, because this document outlines everything from Inspector Inspector Roy's perspective in the difficulties he had in dealing with Sergeant Frizzell right up until the very end. It's all here. Okay?
It's not, colleagues. It will be. It will be. You'll get it by the next meeting.
I'm sorry. This was put in on Friday because I just received it myself this afternoon, and it's a very interesting read. And I think it lays out all the revelations there that you need to have. Now, as I've said before, many times at this committee, when Ms. Burton came to me and discussed her alarm at the alleged harassing behavior that Sergeant Frizzell was visiting upon her employees, I took action as I must take action. It was alleged behavior. What I wanted was to speak with someone who could take the gentleman aside. And Mike Frizzell would have had an opportunity to say, no, I'm not harassing anybody. Yes, my techniques are different or forceful, but they're not. He would have been able to speak to it. You've heard Bruce Rogerson say that we're not into character assassination or certainly career annihilation. I didn't go to Inspector Roy. I wanted somebody who knew Mike Frizzell, who had worked with him, who could sort of say, Mike, there's been some concern about how the employees are feeling after being interviewed by you. And there's been a couple of stories that people have run out of the building, etc. Can you tone it down? Can you think about it? Mike Frizzell himself has said that nobody ever did come and speak to him. Nobody ever did mention this to him. And I realize now that reason is because the order to terminate the investigation had already been given by Inspector Paul Roy, that most of the people had been sent back to their home bases, and that Mike Frizzell, I'm sorry I'm promoting him early here, that Sergeant Frizzell was required to produce his final report. So, yes, I did speak to Assistant Commissioner Rogerson. Yes, I did speak to Doug Lang, and I did speak to Darrell LaFosse. Nobody, as far as I know, and I believe it to be so, nobody went near Mike Frizzell to say, listen, there's some trouble coming out of NCPC with regards to your alleged treatment of witnesses. Can you tone it down? So when I said to you, I did not know, this was 2.5 years later, 2 years later, I did not know who or when the final decision had been taken to either, as Gork was saying, have him removed from the investigation, or as Inspector Roy is saying, he was never removed. He was simply, the investigation was terminated and he was asked to return to his home base. I had no idea. And I was told not to speculate. If I had speculated, I would have thought it would have been Inspector Roy through Assistant Commissioner Gork. The speculation is just speculation. I'll go back again. As head of Chief Human Resources Officer, if anybody comes to me and says that people are being harassed, frightened, for undue reason, I have to act. I can't sit on my hands and say, well, gee, I hope it'll work out.
Okay.
And that's what I did.
I'm just going to ask you to wind up, okay.
I think Staff Sergeant Frizzell might want to respond to that if you would.
Well,
just
I've
seek
got
indulgence.
three other people, Mr. Christopherson, Ms. Niskin Lake, and it's 21 minutes after 6.
Point of order.
Okay, Mr. Lake, okay. Mr. Frizzell, you can respond. I just want to be fair to everyone.
First off, to Ms. Burton's testimony, I believe she said, I don't know who did the interviewing. Is that true? Did everybody else hear that? That I've been labeled with making people cry and she didn't even know who was doing the interviewing? I did not interview Liep Belmer, and Jeff Hutchison and I have regular conversations. He most certainly never cried or ran from a room. That's what I heard. Did anybody hear different? Secondly, I did have a number of issues with Mr. Roy, and let me give you an illustration of why. We've heard here different times that Mr. Roy had no idea what I was doing at the end of the investigation. Let me read you an email. I'm sorry I didn't get it in ahead of time. I didn't know I'd have to read it, but this is from Mr. Roy to Ms. George. Barb, and this is May 31st, just a couple of weeks before the order. He talks about wanting to know how much money has been paid back to the pension fund. Then he states, the other issue surrounds the outsourcing of the administration of the RCMP insurance plans. This issue was identified by the investigation. I know that an audit recently took place, and I'm wondering if any action or repayment of funds to correct the problem have taken place. He's referring to the finding of the audit that says expenses charged to the RCMP group and life disability plans, along with their funding, were found to be inappropriate. Mr. Roy then goes on to say to Ms. George, media lines dealing with these issues need to be prepared in anticipation of inquiries and in answer to the original media stories that surfaced a year ago. A little bit of coaching there for Ms. George when the poop hits the fan. This was sent to me by Mr. Roy. This is what I was acting upon. What I found was, as Ms. George referenced in her letter, they asked for $540,000 to be paid back plus interest. $542,000 was paid back, even though Great West Life sent a check for $578,000. So there's a little thing of a missing $36,000 as well. So anyway, my point being, it was Mr. Roy that brought all this to my attention at the end of the investigation. I'm not sure why he would have done that, knowing that I had quite an issue with this, if he didn't want me to follow up on it. When I did follow up on it, and you've all heard the phone conversation, how harassing it was, the person who I was trying to follow up on it with makes a phone call to Inspector Roy, and well, we all know the rest. I just wanted to set the record straight there.
Well, thank you very much, Staff Sergeant Frizzle. Mr. Christopherson, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'd be interested to reread the testimony of Mr. Estabrooks, and unfortunately, I can't really ask the kind of questions I'd like till I see those documents and reread everything that's said, but that sounds very serious. And what's most disconcerting, Chair, if I'm understanding it correctly, is that it's still ongoing now. Like, this is fairly recent in terms of a week and a half ago, I'm hearing. So that, if anything like that is true, that's truly frightening, that something could have happened in the past, we're investigating it, and now there's potential allegations of further questionable conduct, like at some point, which also I want to take just 10 seconds to state about one person that's come before here so far, because I think it's important. I have heard from a number of people, officers, uniformed and otherwise, and my own impression, I think we are very, very fortunate at this time in the history of the RCMP to have Acting Commissioner Busson in place. Because she is slowly, day by day, trying to restore the confidence, and I, for one, have confidence in her. Her answers were very forthright, even when they weren't necessarily helpful to make the RCMP look right. She was very forthright, so I just want to get that on the record and say that I have great confidence in her, and it's good that we've got her there. Monsieur Waugh, you stated that on April the 18th, I don't agree with the term in terms of referencing Staff Sergeant Frizzell. I don't agree with the term removed. He was not removed. He was returned to his own unit once the criminal investigation was over. Do you stand by that, sir?
Yes, I do, sir.
Okay, help me with something. Later on, at that same meeting, there had suddenly the issue of behavior. Staff Sergeant Frizzell's behavior had become an issue during some intervening discussion of witnesses, and then you were asked again, sir, and then you said, and if it's just the wording that's used, fine, I'll accept that, but there is a question here, and it is, you were asked again by the chair, our chair, did you ask Barbara George or Gork or anyone else to have Staff Sergeant Frizzell removed because of improper behavior? And you said, ask David Gork to have him removed because of improper behavior and also because the investigation was over. Which is it, sir? Is it the investigation was over, or was it a combination of both?
The investigation was over. I needed his report. He had valuable information to add to the report. The investigation was over. After the 17th of June, it was not my responsibility anymore.
Okay, thank you. And I do appreciate that, because you did say earlier, again, at that same meeting, that any concerns that had been raised, that you thought they were manageable and that you should continue to go on. So when you gave a slightly different version, I just want to be clear. You stand by the fact that Staff Sergeant Frizzell, in your opinion, was not removed. The job was completed. He was going back to his original assignment.
Yes, I do.
And if I can, just so you know, and I'm sure you're aware, at the last meeting, 5 days ago, 1 week after you made that statement, the acting commissioner was asked by me, point blank, Is it your understanding that Staff Sergeant Frizzell was removed? Commissioner Busson, my understanding from what I know so far, Staff Sergeant Frizzell was removed. And that's like not based on not having current information. That's a week ago. So we still have a very serious ongoing question as to whether or not Staff Sergeant Frizzell was actually finished his work and was given an assignment and everything else is coincidental, or whether or not he was actually removed as an attempt to blunt any further investigation by him to turn up things that certain powers that be didn't want. So I leave that there for all of us to chew on, and I still maintain it's going to take a public inquiry to get to the bottom of that. We're not going to do it this way. Mr. Staff Sergeant Frizzell, I want to just visit the issue of the computer again. Was that standard? It's in here in the notes, I'm sure, but was that standard procedure, or did that stand out as something unusual? And maybe you could, again, give those circumstances.
It stood out as very unusual, and that's the conversation that Mr. Lang was speaking about that I had with Stéphane Saint-Jacques about a week after I left. He told me my computer had been wiped. I'd never heard of that in my career, and I took exception to all my information being made to disappear.
Who told that?
His name is Staff Sergeant Stéphane Saint-Jacques.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you said also that the backup was gone. Something about the backup too, wasn't it?
Like Mr. Estabrooks, I kept a second copy. I think it's quite a practice in the Mounted Police. And mine did go missing from my desk, yes.
Do you have any thoughts or any knowledge about that? Who ordered it? Who conducted it? Can anybody here in uniform help me identify who might have given that order?
David?
I'd only say that, the laptops are reusable within the organization, so if a laptop was, if the data was eliminated from that, it would be because the laptop would be redeployed to another individual within the organization rather than declare it surplus. So is it unusual? No. Is it unusual in this case? I guess you'd have to decide whether eliminating valuable information from a laptop is eliminating evidence. Normally what we do is we back up the drives. In other words, there should be some disks on the file containing all the emails and all the information as it pertains to that investigation, because in essence you may be eliminating crucial evidence that could be used at a future date.
Well, how do we find out who gave the order?
I guess you'd have to talk to Chief Superintendent Doug Lang, because he's the only one that issued an order to Frizzell.
Staff, do you want to jump in?
Just to clarify, my laptop came with me to the investigation and was leaving with me. It was one assigned to me, not to the investigation. And I believe, according to Saint-Jacques, it was the Ottawa Police Service that gave the order to have it wiped.
Mr. Roy?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to answer this because it was practiced during this investigation because we were in temporary quarters. Temporary equipment was being used, and everybody knew from the investigative team of the process that we'd follow. We started this in October when the first member left the team, where the laptop was swiped. However, everything was being downloaded onto CD and is being kept in the investigative file as of today.
So that still exists?
Yes, it does. Yes.
News to you?
I've been trying to...
Okay. Okay, Mr. Wisniewski, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Sirois, how many years' experience do you have with the RCMP?
I'm a retired member of the RCMP.
How many years' experience?
Well, right now, I mean, if you took all my service, I have 34 years of service, and I have about 20 in the access to information legislation.
So 20 years there. We've heard from Mr. Estabrooks that Mr. Gauvin perhaps has run unusual interference on the ATIP request on the Ottawa Police investigation, and we've also heard the very disturbing news that as recently as a week and a half ago on a Friday, his executive assistant got into a secure area where the archives are kept and was demanding documents, a demand which was highly improper. Mr. Sirois, you were in charge of the ATIP request on the internal audit. Same question that I put to Mr. Estabrooks. Was there anything unusual in the process and what occurred around the ATIP requests on the internal audit?
There was nothing unusual in the original request there, the first request. We received 2 requests, and in the first request, we were just asked to stand down because there was an ongoing criminal investigation. So there was really nothing wrong with that. And then the best to judge if the disclosure of the information would impede the investigation were Inspector Awa and then Mr. William Sullivan. And we met with them, and then they reviewed the report, and then we reviewed the report again, and then yes, we decided that for the time being it's better to sit down and wait until the investigation is over. So there was nothing, it's nothing unusual because they're the one to know. We're not in a position to know exactly because practically we didn't have any clue as to what they would find into the doing the investigation.
Now, you said there was also a second request.
There was a second request, yes.
And any unusual occurrences surrounding that one?
Still, it was put on the back burner because the investigation was ongoing. Because if you look at the time that we received the request, the investigation was ongoing.
So did the requests, were the requests ever fulfilled?
Well, the first one was fulfilled, but it was devoid of substance, practically. Out of 25 pages, there was nothing to. And then on the second request, I contacted the requester and I said, listen, I said, would you rather wait or you want me to send you that 25, almost 25 blank pages? 22 or 25, I don't remember exactly. And the second requester told me, he said, I'm going to wait until the end. So.
Okay. Ms. George, we've heard that you placed calls to Assistant Commissioner Lafosse. Is that correct?
Yes,
you placed
correct.
a call? Yes.
Correct.
We heard from Assistant Commissioner Lafosse that you requested Mr. Frizzell to be removed. Is that correct or not correct? Yes or no?
No. What I requested, I told him about very briefly, because our conversation lasted, as he said, less than a minute. I said I was having a lot of difficulty listening to complaints of harassment, and this had to be stopped. Now, if Mr. Lafosse, with all due respect, if he thinks that that's removal, then that's his opinion. But what I said was he needs to be stopped. And he said, well, Barb, you don't speak to me. I have nothing to do with him.
Ms. George, thank you. And he was absolutely unequivocal in saying that he understood that conversation as being a request for removal and told you to speak to Assistant Commissioner Rogerson. And we've heard, now you did call Assistant Commissioner Rogerson. You're in agreement with that?
Assistant Commissioner Lafosse was not in a position of power to remove anybody, nor was I. And I did call Assistant Commissioner.
And we heard today Assistant Commissioner Rogerson state that he understood your phone call as a request to have Mr. Frizzell removed. Did you make that request? Yes or no?
I made a request to have his behavior stopped. I needed somebody to speak with him.
So yes or no, did you have him?
I cannot give you a yes or no answer. This was 2 years ago. With all due respect, I was very concerned about the people, and when I spoke with Assistant Commissioner Rogerson, I needed someone to speak with Sergeant Frizzell.
When I asked you back in February who ordered the removal, you didn't say it was over 2 years ago and I can't remember and I don't know exactly. You were absolutely clear. You stated, I can state with absolute finality that it was neither Commissioner Zaccardelli nor me who had anything whatsoever to do with, as you say, the removal of Sergeant Frizzell. You at that time did not say, I can't remember his... Oh.
I can still tell you that today. It wasn't either of us. Sorry.
Okay, I'm going to turn it lastly over to, we're getting the bells. I'm going to allow Mr. Lake 5 minutes, and then the gavel's coming down, and we're going to adjourn the meeting.
I would like to introduce, Mr. Chairman.
Well, Mr. Williams, we might have to wait till next
I'll
meeting.
just to give you notice of motion. You don't have to deal with it today.
Okay, go ahead.
Notice of motion is that the Public Accounts Committee asks the Library of Parliament to engage a forensic auditor to try and present all this information and emails and timelines and so on in some kind of understandable format so we can actually understand and have some sense as to what this is all going on. So I give that as a notice of motion. We can discuss it at the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. We'll take that on notice. Mr. Lake, 5 minutes, and then the meeting will adjourn at the end of 5 minutes sharp.
Good. Mr. Rogerson, just tying up some loose ends here. We're wanting to know, were many of the same people involved in the gift-giving scandal investigated by the OPP and informally disciplined also involved in the problems with the pension and insurance funds?
I wouldn't say many. I would say that a select few.
Who were they?
Well, it would have been Jim Ivanovich and Deputy Govan, myself, along with a number of other people.
Okay. I want to move to Mr. Frizzell, it's been said over and over again, the semantics about the investigation being over. In your mind, should it have been over when it was over?
In my mind, there are still things to investigate.
There are still things to investigate.
You named one earlier.
Can you reiterate whether, and I think you've answered this before, but just for flow here, whether Ms. Burton and Ms. George were under investigation?
Under investigation is too strong a term.
Maybe whether you were looking into some things, you were following some leads regarding?
Yeah, they would definitely have to be spoken to. They have information.
Was Mr. Waugh aware of this?
It was Mr. Roy who sent me the information that I was acting upon, so...
Okay. Now, moving to Ms. George, Mr. Waugh stated earlier that in 2001 he worked with the RCMP and actually reported to you, I believe. Can you tell us what his role was at that point?
Actually, when I arrived there, he had been reporting to another chief superintendent, so he was already on spot. He was an inspector, and he was actually doing a lot of support work for the two superintendents that were in officer staffing at the time. He was doing a lot of excellent work, but it was in support work with Chief Superintendent McCauley, who was the superintendent at the time, and another superintendent.
And he reported directly to you, though? Okay.
No, he reported that.
May I answer?
Yeah.
I report to a chap, a civilian employee by the name of Dennis Fedor.
Okay, and Dennis you worked Fedor. Under, maybe not directly, but you
not
worked
directly
under Ms. George?
Ms. George.
Okay, and you worked with Ms. Burton at the time?
Ms. Burton came in the picture, like I said, I didn't know what time, but I heard today April of that year, April of 2001. So she had an office on the same floor as I did, but I never worked directly with Ms. Burton. Okay, I'm just curious, just because of the sort of relationships that you would have had working together in that group, did that ever sort of cross your mind that maybe when you were placed in the position of lead investigator in this new case, that might be, maybe there was a little bit of inappropriateness to that? I need to mention, first of all, when I was assigned by Chief Bevan to conduct the investigation, I did not know who were involved. And when I got the first reports, the people that were, like the key individuals were Mr. Ivanovich, who was in charge, who was the CHRO, and others. But I certainly didn't see this as being an hindrance. In fact, I saw it as an asset, because I knew the inner workings of the RCMP, I knew where people were at. And because I had worked, in reality, I had a closest relationship with Mr. Fraser McCauley. We worked together on several staffing actions, and I thought it was an asset. So when Mr. Frizzell was having conversations with you and Ms. Burton was contacting you personally about some issues she was having, and when you were having conversations with Ms. George and you started to realize that there was more to it, did you tell anybody that maybe, did you inform somebody that maybe at this point there might be some conflict of interest there, given past relationships? I never saw a conflict of interest. Never did? Because the Ms. George and Ms. Burton were helpful to the investigation. They allowed us to obtain the documentation that we needed, because this was human resources unit, and so they were helpful. At no time did I looked at them as persons of interest in this investigation.
Mr. Frizzell, you said that you got the information actually from Mr. Waugh, I believe is what you'd said. Can you maybe comment on that? And I think we're
out of time.
Mr. Raw's email to Ms. George, she says, the audit shows the money was taken, it should have been paid back. The email reply he gets back is, no, it wasn't paid back, we just took another $542,000.
Okay, that's it. Okay, we're out of time. The bells are ringing. I want to thank all the witnesses here. I want to thank my colleagues. The meeting adjourned.